Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Became the Blind Vice Captain Magic Knight in Black Clover movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. The Clover Kingdom was saved from destruction. The wise man saved the kingdom and the demon was eliminated, becoming the story that wet nurses tell children. The story everyone knows and no one forgets. His companions were killed on his first mission and his vision was completely shattered. Tormented, he grew up under the watchful eye of the Wizard King throughout his journey as a magic knight. This is the story of the Magical Swordsman. This is the story of Naruto Uzumaki, the next Wizard King. Chapter 1. The Clover Kingdom was inhabited by people with magical powers. All inhabitants, whether children or the elderly, had sufficient magical power to perform everyday tasks. Some had even greater power, allowing them to enter knightly orders and become members of the Magic Knights, the people who protected the kingdom in conflicts with neighboring kingdoms when necessary and protected the inhabitants from internal problems within the kingdom. When young people reached the age of 15, they were summoned to receive their grimoire, which they would use to take the entrance exam for the Magic Knights. Grimoires amplified the user's magical power and allowed them to use complex and powerful spells as required. Although anyone could receive a grimoire, only a select few entered the established knight orders in the Clover Kingdom. Magical power. Within the established society of the Clover Kingdom, wealth was merely a requirement for rising in society. Magical power was what mattered. It made you important or banished you to complete oblivion. The more magical power you possessed, the more recognition you received from your peers and comrades. But even if you were someone with great power, its reach was still limited for the villagers. The cases in which commoners possess greater magical power are rare and very limited. Typically, members of the kingdom's nobility and royalty possess the greatest magical power and are those who ascend to the position of Wizard King when the latter is finally replaced, either due to old age or death in battle. This is one of the enormous gaps in the society of the Clover Kingdom, driven to the bottom by the arrogant attitude of the nobility, royalty, and some of the knightly orders serving the kingdom. The nobles frown upon mere commoners entering the knightly orders, and the knights themselves frown upon the treatment they receive or the fact that they live in a completely different part of the kingdom than they do, with less suffering and far more comfort, as if it had been arranged by someone above. But despite this gap, some commoners have been able to showcase their power and skill, rising above the nobles and royalty, placing themselves in positions where they have been forced to accept them for their magical power. This latter aspect is all the more important in a kingdom where magic knights are revered and beloved by its inhabitants, as they are the Clover's army when conflict erupts. There are 9 orders of magical knights serving the Wizard King of the Clover Kingdom. 3 of them are notable for their close ties to the Wizard King position, and 2 of those 3 have royal ties, making them the closest to the most important position desired by a wizard of the Clover Kingdom. Each of the knight orders has a captain in command. This captain reports directly to the Wizard King, and according to rumors and reports from other wizards and knights, each captain has the power and strength of 100 ordinary wizards, making them pillars of the kingdom's forces and respected by all its inhabitants and enemies. Currently, a decoration ceremony was being held in the Clover Kingdom for the merits earned by some of the young knights in the service of one of the orders. The ceremony was presided over by Julius Navachrono, the current Wizard King of the kingdom and the most powerful wizard present. At the ceremony, the knights with the most stars are honored by the wise king, receiving promotions within the knightly orders and advancing from one rank to the next as the king deems appropriate. These ranks place a wise knight above the others, granting them status and relevance based on their rank, which grants them greater respect among their peers. After the ceremony, the young men are taken to a banquet and a small post-ceremony so that the knights of the different orders can establish brotherhood among themselves, create bonds, and join forces against the enemies of the Clover. But the mood at the party did not seem warm. "Noel. You don't have to apologize to them. You don't have to leave now." One of the young black bulls held his companion by the wrist. His pale green eyes were brimming with rage, focused solely on the members of House Silva. "That's..." The discussion had begun. Members of the Golden Dawn and the Silver Eagles had questioned the Wizard King's interest in commoners like Asta and Yuno, whom he had brought to the decoration ceremony and left at the ensuing reception. Of all the orders present, both were the most open to conflict with the young men present. The sound of metal cut through the air, the atmosphere heavy. The eyes of every knight present shifted toward the small figure of the young member of the Black Bulls, the order most despised by knights and civilians. "I thought knights would be people to be respected, to be admired. But you've only proven yourselves to be trash." Sand began to surround Asta. Like a massive compacted layer, the material trapped the boy under a massive weight that restricted any movement on his side. "Silence." One of the members of the Golden Dawn stepped forward. Like the rest of her comrades and the 3 members of the Silver Eagles present, Alec-Dora Sandler felt insulted by Asta's inappropriate behavior during the ceremony, by his presence, and by the fact that Yuno had also been invited by the Wizard King. "I'll end this. I'll prove to you, so Arad, that you." The sand was cut through by a swift movement from within. Alec-Dora's eyes widened and she took a step back as Asta's figure appeared behind the sand curtain, a black sword in his hands, his eyes fixed on him. "But what?" Solid Silva looked at this with a hilarious smile. The sound of rustling leaves alerted the young commoner's companions. "Water creation magic. Killer serpent court." The blue light accompanied those words. Water formed and a water snake shot out at its target, clearly intent on attacking. "Not yet." The wind stirred. The blade swung downward, swift and sharp. Gritting his teeth, Asta cut the spell, letting the water soak the ground. Fog restriction magic. Fog spider thread. Nebra Silva stepped forward. Appearing confidently, she cast her restraining spell on the Black Bull's member, with the confidence her magical power and status had given her, since she was a child. The silver-haired woman's eyes widened as her spell was cut short by the dark blade of the commoner she was trying to subdue, appearing unharmed. "Not yet. You must learn your place." Commoner Alec-Dora appeared before Asta's vision. Sand creation magic. Sand Knight. The sand behind Asta slowly formed a perfect light-colored puddle. With a roar, enormous arms surrounded the young, green-eyed mage and held him tightly, forcing him to drop the sword he'd used to cut through the spells. The enormous sand-formed torso of a knight imprisoned its creator's adversary with its enormous arms. Being helped by the competition, Solid clicked his tongue. He slowly flipped through the pages of his grimoire, searching for a spell. "Now that the commoner is trapped, I can eliminate him." Water creation magic. Holy water killing bullet. Up above, next to Solid Silva, a huge water bullet began to form after the Magic Knight's words. Seconds later, Solid aimed his right hand at the imprisoned Asta. Time slowed. The spell shot directly toward the Black Bull member, who was unable to move under Alec-Dora's spell. Asta was completely targeted, and his chances of survival had plummeted in the eyes of the other Magic Knights present. Faced with this situation, Yuno slowly reached for her grimoire. Although she didn't acknowledge it directly or verbally, Asta was her brother, friend, and rival. She couldn't allow herself to see him killed and then look the members of her church in the face. "Not yet." Asta's right arm broke one of the arms of the Sand Knight imprisoning him. In front of him, his 5-leaf grimoire appeared and the handle of another sword emerged from the pages of the ancient book. Swift. Powerful. The slash delivered by the black steel greatsword cut through Alec-Dora's spell in a second and repelled Solid's spell straight back at him, striking the Silver Eagle member and forcing him to his knees. "This rat has managed to force me to my knees. A miserable commoner. Enough. Are you going to continue to shame our family?" The pressure mounted. Despite possessing no magic within him, Asta noticed the presence of the Silver Eagle's captain, just as he did his own. "Brother. You should stop playing with someone like him." Stopping paying attention to him, Solid. "A mere commoner, a rat, has managed to alter your thoughts and feelings. You're not objective. You've paid too much attention to him." The pressure increased. Asta's face turned sweaty, anguished. He had begun to feel his lungs tighten, his mouth dry, and his legs tremble in the presence of Nozzle Silva, the captain of the Silver Eagles. "Finishing this now will cleanse the stain on our house. Magic of." The sound of a plate shattering stopped Nozzle's summoning, simultaneously releasing his pressure on the entire room, allowing Asta to breathe. Yum, yum. The audience stirred, alerted by the new presence. A young man sat at one of the huge tables of food. His golden hair was visible to everyone, and no one could ignore the blindfold covering the boy's eyes, though he didn't seem too concerned about it. This was delicious. The cloak of the Magic Knights of the Aquamarine Deer Order covered the torso of the banquet intruder. The symbol of their order was visible to everyone. "Who is this blind man?" Solid Silva spat those words maliciously into the eyes of the young man with a mustache. He didn't seem bothered by a simple malicious question, nor by the clear and direct mockery about his blindness, which was why he had a white bandage with a patterned stripe over his eyes. "The ramen prepared by the palace chefs is really too good. I think I'm stuffed." The Aqua Deer member shamelessly caressed his swollen stomach, which was beginning to show slightly from under his jacket and over his dark trousers. Those words were an indirect insult to Nozzle's actions. A young man had interrupted his punishment and was mocking them directly without shame, as if he didn't fear the repercussions of his own words. "Insolence is often paid for with death in some countries," the mercury slowly began to manifest. "Do you even know who we are, boy?" "Excuse me? I don't think I heard you." The boy removed his index finger from his right ear. He had been probing his auditory system during the Silver Eagle's captain's speech, as if those words weren't meant for him. Nozzle's eyebrows fell in a disgruntled expression, but he didn't show his irritation or anger. He wasn't as direct with his words or actions as his siblings, who weren't inclined to directly insult their older brother. "You damn rat." The holy water-killing bullet formed again at the caster's side. Without considering the repercussions of his own actions, Solid Silva fired a spell at the blind young man who was still caressing his stomach. Solid. But the concern that some had about the member of the aquamarine deer dissipated with what the boy did. Grasping the handle of a dark katana, the young magic knight drew his sword as he leaped onto the table, allowing everyone to observe his height, his well-formed and athletic body. With his order's cloak billowing behind him, the young man summoned his own grimoire. Wind magic. Piercing slash. The wind summoned by the knight surrounded his katana, giving it a whitish shine, almost intolerable to human eyes. His hands tightly wrapped around the katana's handle and held firm, leaving the tip of the weapon pointing toward the floor. Like an old samurai, the boy inverted the katana, placing the cutting edge toward the ceiling of the room. When Solid's attack was in the distance, he pulled the sword upward in a perfect upward motion, breaking his opponent's spell. Sorry. I watered the food a little. I think the soup will be a little watery." Along with his companions, Yuno's eyes widened slightly. That boy had used the same magic as him, but in a completely different way. He used spells based on wind magic, creating creations like his eagles. However, the member of the aquamarine deer had imbued the blade of his katana with wind magic, allowing him to cut through his enemy's spell, as if it were nothing, just like a star. He really is strong and precise. Klaus Linetz watched the young man's movements as he guided the katana in a motion without straining every muscle in his body. He had performed a dance, a movement that could be added to a choreography or a performance, and he had to admit that the knight hadn't wasted an ounce of his power with the gesture. Is he smiling? The smile was noticeable to the sharp eyes of the Silver Eagle's captain. Nozzle Silva found this strange, as if the boy knew his brother was going to make that move, as if he knew what everyone there was going to do. That was great. Breaking the new tension generated by the conflict caused by Solid, Estarossa showed what some of those present thought about the use of wind magic by the young blonde. The fact that, as if he had eyes, the young man moved his head in the direction Estarossa was. "You cut the spell just like I did." The click indicated to those present that the blonde had sheathed his katana with a simple, concise movement, as if he had only been caressing it. "Cut spells." The boy jumped off the table and walked towards Estarossa. "Are you the boy without magic power? The one with anti-magic magic? I think I've heard about you." The young man felt his hand touch the shoulder of the Black Bull's member. "What are you doing?" Blushing and embarrassed by the direct touch, Noelle Silva pulled her hand away from the magic knight, as if his touch burned her skin and marked her with it. "Sorry. Sometimes I can't see where I'm going." Bujajajaj. The bead of sweat appeared on some of the magic knights present. Others only showed a forced, uncertain smile. And some maintained their serious expressions, their eyes fixed on the newest member of the ceremony. "I wouldn't like to cut short your interaction. But a proper introduction would be necessary." The captain of the Crimson Lion Order, Figolian Vermilion, made an appearance, cutting off any speeches, now being the complete center of attention. All eyes were on the captain of the Crimson Lion. "My manners. Where could I have left them?" Scratching the back of his neck, the blind wizard gave an apologetic smile for his discourtesy. "If I had known the great Figolian was present, I would not have been so impolite." The young man bowed to the man in front of him, sweeping his right arm across his body. "Naruto Uzumaki, vice captain of the Order of the Aquamarine Deer. It is a pleasure to be surrounded by such distinguished men and ladies." He was calm, relaxed, and optimistic. Figolian saw that in Naruto's words and gestures. He could sense his power and abilities with just one movement. He was powerful and seemed like the kind of person who could lead an order or an entire army. "Reminds me of Julius." The captain of the Crimson Lion found similarities between the young mage of the Aquamarine Deer and the current wizard king of the Clover Kingdom. It didn't take him long to recognize that. Same physical features, same relaxed demeanor. It was almost as if he were seeing the Wizard King's son standing before him. What's the vice captain of an order doing in the banquet hall without his captain's company? Rill's too young to be embarrassing one of his fellow order members. He's still just a kid. I would ask a Silva member not to speak ill of my captain. Naruto's right hand had fallen to the handle of his sword. Even though he had no eyes, Figolian felt the intensity behind the young magic knight's nod. Actions have consequences. Just like words. Solid gritted his teeth at Naruto's willingness to fight. He would have gone ahead if he hadn't known at a glance that the boy was more powerful than him, more skilled with his grimoire. And that, somehow, infuriated him. Before the new confrontation could erupt, a wizard opened the hall doors with a resounding force, forcing the knights inside to stop whatever they were doing. The city is being attacked. The city? The royal capital is the heart of the Clover Kingdom and is protected by a massive magical cloak that prevents any enemy from attacking the city. This information was known to all the Magic Knights, and they found such a direct and sudden attack impossible without them having been warned or even noticed by the enemy. I know you don't want my orders. A huge model made of magic and sand formed between the knights present. Fugolian took charge, taking charge of the situation in the absence of the Wizard King. We'll all split up into teams, keeping the people safe from the enemies attacking our kingdom. I'll go after my brother and the Black Bull's boy. There was no urgency in the Crimson Lion captain's orders. There was no hesitation surrounding the words, no tone of haste. Like a commander, Fugolian commanded the knights present and sent them to different areas of the royal capital to rescue any civilians in danger, so as to keep the royal family and its subjects safe from all the evil that was spreading throughout the place, leaving dozens of corpses that were harming the kingdom. Yum yum. Seated again in his position, the young vice-captain of the Aquamarine Deer ate the abundant food prepared by the castle's cooks. As if he hadn't noticed the urgency of the situation, Naruto kept emptying a huge pile of ramen bowls into a massive wobbly tower, defying gravity and likely to topple over with a mere breeze. Uzumaki-sama. One of the mages bowed to the blind knight. Unconcerned, Naruto stood up, causing the enormous tower of ramen bowls to shake. Looks like we're going to get some action, marks Francois. The wise man's right hand nodded towards the Aquamarine Deer's vice-captain, earning a small proud, determined smile from the young man, just like Julius used to. Various undead have appeared around the capital. I don't know where Julius is. This man. The young man stretched out his right arm. The cloak that marked him as a knight of the Aquamarine Deer stirred at that simple gesture. The Magi accompanying the Wizard King's advisor felt the wind stir around the blonde. We're going to have a talk after this. He's abandoning his duties as Wizard King, and these things happen. With a star. A sorcerer capable of using the bodies of the dead as puppets, like a zombie army that could surpass any other army present on Earth. That was the enemy the young Magic Knight of the Black Bulls was facing. It was an enemy that was testing the limits of the anti-magic boy's endurance. Asta was sweating, his arms felt heavy, and he could barely move his legs to launch one last move that would allow him to defeat his adversary. Asta had pushed the enemy mage to his limits. Using his swords, the newest member of the Black Bulls outclassed his enemy and his companions to the point where the enemy called for reinforcements. They summoned them with the intention of finishing off their enemies, of eliminating the knights from the capital, and it was precisely because of this that many were taken from the royal capital. The Eye of Midnight Sun. With that name, the terrorists presented themselves, all of them prepared to give their lives against the Clover Kingdom. A war was about to break out, something some could see. But only one among all those who observed the event understood that this point was important and that Asta was someone key in a strange way he still didn't understand. I'd say a good bowl of ramen, you could serve it to me in a tight time frame. Overcoming the generated spatial magic and overcoming the terrorists' reaction, a beam of cutting wind directly struck the magician known as Raid's burrito, generating a bleeding cut on his torso that stained the man's clothes with the crimson color of blood. What they did to the deed, Naruto stomped his foot on the ground. He gripped the handle of his katana firmly in both hands. There were no eyes, but the terrorist group Space Mage felt daggers aimed solely at him. It's something I won't forgive, you know. The vice-captain's words weren't directed toward any of the enemies present. The one who had spoken and left Fugolian's body bleeding on the floor was the clear target of the knight's wrath. TCH. We can't lose raids yet. Balto summoned his Grimoire again. The anti-magic boy was likely to undo his spell, but they had to retreat now that they had what their leader had requested. But no matter how hard he tried to summon some mana to cast a spell, he didn't feel anything moving toward him. Not even a bit. Now, if you think magic is going to reach you, a trail of dust followed the vice-captain's movements. Voltos felt the magic emanating from him, the danger of the sword the magician was about to use against his neck. You are sorely mistaken. The slash missed due to a gap the young man hadn't anticipated. Using his body force and twisting his torso, Naruto climbed onto the rooftop where Voltos had been standing earlier. Someone else, a mage of enormous power, had used spatial magic to move the terrorists, just as he had done with the knights. That's bullshit, the blonde declared, nodding his head to where Asta should have been. I think I've gotten a bit old and let those bastards get their act together. Bah. He swung his katana. I think he's got everything under control, like always. The click of the katana closed the Uzumaki's speech. Chapter 2. The Eye of the Midnight Sun. Since the last confrontation and the movement of the Diamond Kingdom's mages, the Clover Kingdom hadn't suffered an unexplained altercation, nor had they known who the enemy behind the confrontation was. Now, the Eye of the Midnight Sun was the Wizard King's primary target after his confrontation with the leader of the terrorist group. A group that seemed to have certain informants within the Clover Kingdom, something Julius realized after the recent attack on the royal capital. Perhaps he had let the enemy move too freely. But after seeing the enemy's capabilities, he had an idea of what they were up against. Julius Navachrono possessed time magic. This power was granted to him by his grimoire and amplified since he joined the Magic Knights of the Clover Kingdom. It only increased when he was recognized as the Wizard King, the most powerful sorcerer in the entire kingdom and the leader of the 9 Knight Orders that served him. He was the leader when the kingdom was attacked and had managed to repel the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun when he confronted him after Estarossa kidnapping. The Wizard King was admired, respected, and inspired dreams in many of the younger generation of knights. Estarossa's dream, along with his pact with Yuno, was to become the Wizard King. One of them would rise above the other and lead the knights in the future. He was renowned to that extent, and to that extent he could promote the young knights and make them believe in the impossible. But the wise man had his own concerns, his own duties as the wise man and as the leader of the knights in his service. He also had to be the one to step forward to protect the civilians, to sacrifice himself for them when the time came. That was the role of the wise man. Julius's main objective was to understand the plans of the group known as the Eye of Midnight Sun, to understand what they were looking for and their motives. But to do so, he would have to find the traitors among the knights who served him. Only by eliminating the mages in charge of the barrier could an enemy cause the commotion the terrorist group had recently caused. And that was a concern for him. One he had to address to safeguard the well-being of the Clover Kingdom. Do you want me to investigate these too? Julius's trusted men could be counted on the fingers of one hand. His followers probably thought he was kind, that he loved everyone in the kingdom, and in a way, he was. But as a leader, like the wise man, he had to be objective about what had happened. There were traitors in the kingdom and he didn't know who he could trust. The rumors are too many. Gelderpoise seems too tainted. I shouldn't, but being objective now could lead to unfortunate destruction in the future. Gogolian had been seriously wounded and was currently undergoing urgent care, leaving his order without an active captain. One of the few men Julius could have used as a commander. Unlike Nozzle, Gogolian was calmer in battle and had the true character of a king, a commander. A huge fat guy. I don't usually mess with looks, but his laugh really gives me the creeps. Elder Poiset was the current captain of the Purple Orc Order. His ambition for growth and his business dealings were known by all and were no secret to anyone. Due to his rise to captain, rumors arose about how he obtained his promotion, power and wealth, branding him corrupt. I'd like to be wrong. Julius accepted the fact that he hoped he was wrong. If one of the captains were a traitor, it would weaken the kingdom's inhabitants' faith in them, something Julius couldn't allow. Not when a terrorist group was lurking, waiting for any glitch they might make in their next confrontation. And that's why you're going to use me, right? It sounds kind of funny, but I'm a gentleman. And at the same time you're like a ninja, aren't you? A dry laugh escaped Naruto's lips. As a child, he had lived in a village hidden deep in the kingdom's most remote forests. When the time came to become what was expected of him, his village was destroyed, the old buildings burned to the ground, and not even the monument to its leaders remained standing after the attack. He was the only one of his people still alive, at least as far as he knew. You were supposed to accept me to be a knight, not a ninja. The magic knights called mana what the ninjas called chakra. It was the same energy, but with completely different names and used in completely different ways. And you are. But I need the ninja. I thought only the Diamond Kingdom used a group of assassins who went after traitors. What the king had proposed was basically for me to act as an enforcer against traitors, to hunt down Gelder to uncover her dirty laundry, her shady dealings beneath the table. I don't mind getting my hands dirty with blood. But I'd rather be like a gentleman. I have respect for you, Julius. Naruto grew up without caring parents. From childhood, he was raised as a ninja, as a weapon, and he passed every test he was subjected to. He survived the ninja exam imposed by the 5th leader of his village and eliminated all his classmates with his bare hands. He wasn't proud of what he had done as a child and he wasn't willing to do it again, not unless there was a clear and concise goal, something that would do good for the world. If his killing saved people, he was willing to do it. I'm not saying you should necessarily kill him, Naruto. As vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer, you have responsibilities and a code to follow. That's understandable. But information is a necessary power. We need that power over Gelder. The information needed on Gelder, if he followed the path not necessary for the Wizard King, meant they would have a traitor and possibly several more. That was what Julius needed from Naruto. To obtain the names of all the traitors in the court, of all the knights who sided with the terrorist group. I suppose I can't refuse. With a shrug, Naruto simply accepted the orders of the Wizard King, the man he owed obedience to as a knight. You're the Wizard King. I don't want you to do it because I'm the king. I want you to do it if you truly consider me a friend and someone you can trust. Harsh words. Naruto trusted his life to the man standing before him, and not because he was the Wizard King or the most powerful wizard currently in existence. Julius had rescued him from a cruel life in which he would have been a murderer. It was in his origins, in his blood. He was raised as a weapon like the rest of his companions, those he killed to become the ultimate weapon of his people. You know how to hit where it hurts. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto looked defeated. He couldn't do anything against those words, against the urgency with which Julius seemed to demand them. I'll have to use my skills. But it's going to cost you dearly. My order pays well, so it won't be money. The man's lips twisted into a smile. What exactly do you want? Ramen. A huge amount of ramen to feed me for the next few months. That'll be a huge blow to the Clover Kingdom's coffers, you know. The Wind Mage, an accomplished swordsman and a well-rounded user of his magic while also wielding his sword. The only negative point anyone could find about Naruto was that his stomach was like a black hole. He would swallow ramen bowls as if someone was about to steal them, and despite eating tons of them, he was still a competent mage, an athletic man who was the envy of many other young men. That's going to be a real blow to my wallet, the king admitted, giving a defeated smile. But I suppose you always ask for exactly the same thing. I've paid for similar ones before. Ichiraku. That's correct. Before the wise king and the young vice captain could continue their conversation, they were both interrupted by the floating face of Marx Francois, whose features showed urgency. We have an emergency, wise man. As the wise king's advisor, Marx was aware of everything that was happening in the kingdom. Depending on the circumstances, the man acted as a messenger to warn the wise king of the dangers his knights were facing. What has emerged, Marx? The Eye of the Midnight Sun is at work again. A member of the Green Mantis Order has reported an emergency in Nairn. It seems someone has been kidnapping children and draining their magical powers. In a world where magical power was everything, for someone to be denied access to the world's power source was a terrible punishment, something that would make those children suffer to the point of despair. My work is piling up. Naruto stood up from his seat. There were things that, as a magic knight and a man, he couldn't tolerate. And one of those things that repulsed his mind and made his blood boil was the use of children in any experiment by anyone. The use of infants by adults was something Naruto hated with all his might. He'd been through it before. I'm going to prepare a space mage, Naruto-san. Marx understood the vice captain's urgency. If the Wizard King trusted the boy before him as his advisor and right-hand man, Marx should do the same and accept that the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer was someone to be reckoned with on the battlefield. If it's necessary for you to bring something. No need for Marx, thank you. He carried his sword on his left side and his grimoire on his right. He currently had all the equipment he normally used as a magic knight and didn't see the need to carry anything else. The chances of these things hindering him in battle were too high. We'll send the captains when possible. Until then, try to hold on. Hold on? That's a bit pessimistic for my taste, Marx. I think I can have a victory over the Eye of Midnight Sun and show them that no one can mess with the Clover. They were confident words, full of an optimism that Marx saw as similar to Julius, his companion and now wise man. The boy has grown well since Julius rescued him. He has become a great knight and nothing remains of what his people wanted for him. Marx had initially refused to accept an assassin, a living weapon, into the knightly order and become a magic knight. However, after the boy's first mission, he watched him grow up hampered by blindness and with the remorse of more murdered comrades. And for the first time, Marx was glad he had been wrong in his thinking. Be careful, Naruto. I know what you're capable of. The young man looked into the eyes of the wise man through his blindfold, showing nothing more than a small smile, before making the characteristic gesture of the Clover Kingdom. Crossing his right arm over his chest with 3 fingers facing forward. I'll come back alive. The promise. Both Julius and Marx understood that those last words were a promise to them, and when Naruto made a promise, he never broke it. This thought calmed both men, who watched as the boy was enveloped by spatial magic and disappeared from the Wizard King's office, leaving him with his advisor. Naruto Uzumaki. He really is an encouraging young man, Marx. Julius let a smile appear on his lips as he watched the boy's back slowly disappear. No doubt, Wizard King. This is the first time I've been relieved that I'd been wrong about my own thoughts. The boy has proven to be more than some of us think, just like Yami. A potential assassin and a foreigner. When Julius took them both in, at different times, he received the same criticisms and realized that moving to the Clover Kingdom would take much longer than he expected. But their actions, Yami and Naruto proved to be good gentlemen, good men. No doubt about it. That boy is someone who has broken many rules. I hope I don't cause any trouble by making things easier for him. Both men remained silent. Both Julius and Marx hoped Naruto would hold out until more reinforcements were sent. Nairn. Conflict zone. Behind the kidnapping of children and the theft of their magical power was the terrorist group the Eye of Midnight Sun, the same group that had recently attacked the royal capital in search of one of the artifacts necessary for their plans. Unbeknownst to the terrorist group's allies, they had to confront members of the Black Bulls to complete the plan, something that ultimately went wrong for the terrorists. Basta and Ghosh of the Black Bulls stopped the enemies by containing various adversaries until the appearance of the leader of the terrorist group. Licht, a powerful magician who uses light magic with which he stopped Asta and left him badly injured to the point of being unable to move. Just as Licht was about to kill Asta and retrieve the grimoire and the swords, Yami appeared to confront him. Using his battle style and darkness magic, the captain of the Black Bulls slightly overpowered the enemy leader, who stopped receiving support from Voltos when Asta finally defeated the space mage using Kai, as Yami called the way he sensed the intentions of his adversaries. In an epic confrontation, Licht was completely defeated with the appearance of Ghosh and the use of one of his spells, capable of reflecting his enemy's light magic, which gave peace to the 4 members of the Black Bulls present on the battlefield. However, the battle did not end with the fall of Licht. Making an appearance, the 3 most powerful members of the terrorist group intervened in the confrontation, placing their leader in a cocoon of flames and focusing their attention on the magic knights present, distilling hatred towards the people who injured the man they followed to the end of their own lives. Using his superiority and power, the third eye of the Midnight Sun subdued Yami and placed the captain in a position where he could not continue fighting, no matter how stoic and carefree the captain himself appeared. The third eye boasted the strongest members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. According to Licht, they were even better at fighting than he was. Yami could only endure a few moments of confrontation with the 3. After that, he was thrown against a huge rock and crushed by the 3 terrorists. I'm sorry. At the same time that a shadow slash ran towards the captain, another wind slash blocked the attack copied by the third eye member, generating a small explosion. You're old, Yami-san. I'm sorry such a young guy has to save my ass. The third eye regrouped, leaving space between the new fighter and themselves. Eye of Betrayal, the imitation magic user, was the first to notice his new enemy's weakness. Like Yami, the boy wielded a katana, using magic similar to that of the Black Bull's captain. It wouldn't be too difficult to defeat him. Beyond this is getting slightly interesting. That kid, it's not like he has a huge amount of mana in his body. I hate anyone who hurts Licht. If he hurts Licht, I'll kill him. Another human to send to despair. This is just wonderful. Veto of despair. That member of the third eye looked too much like a beastman, a hybrid human animal being that walked on 2 legs. Naruto swore he was more like a 2-legged dog because of his scent. Despair, huh? A gust of wind stirred the robes of the 3 third eye members, forcing Licht to observe what was about to happen. Despair isn't something I can see in myself. He disappeared. Veto's instincts kicked in, and the man crossed his mana-wrapped arms in front of himself, being lured into the trap. In midair, appearing in front of Veto and forcing Raya and Fauna to move, Naruto spun and reversed course, colliding his sword with Raya's, sending the mage tumbling backward. This boy. Thus stirred as the Uzumaki's feet touched the cave floor. He yanked his katana back, turning his head. As Veto was about to plunge it through his chest, the vice-captain moved, deflecting his opponent's direct blow, creating sparks as his sword grazed the mana surrounding the opponent's arm. I'd say you have power, human. Small cuts appeared on Despair's limbs. Have you cut off my magic? Have you cut through my mana? This makes me want to send you to despair, human. Fire spirit magic. Naruto's eardrums were shattered by that phrase. Soon, his nostrils were filled with the smell of smoke and ash. Salamander breath. A mighty torrent of fire erupted from the jaws of the fire spirit, Salamander. The fire carved a powerful groove in the rock and engulfed the wizard completely in a cloud of flame. Such a direct attack. Wind creation magic. The fire began to spin. An immense whirlwind, filled with power and mana, reached the enormous hole generated in the cave. Dome of the Wind God. Veto heard the snap of fingers. It was subtle, drowned out by the crackling of the flames and the intensity of the hurricane force wind. Human. Flames burst forth, enveloping the entire place in fire and wind. The flaming pillar, that immense whirlwind resulting from the salamander's calls, exploded like a massive firework, forcing the third eye to retreat and separate again, slightly burned by the immense flames. I burned some of my knight's cloak. Rising from the young vice-captain's left shoulder, a thread of smoke mingled with the smoke resulting from the enormous burst of flames. Human. Veto's teeth appeared in a gleaming row, savage and ready to take his opponent's jugular. I'm boiling to take your despair. I don't think I'm hitting that way. Both moved at tremendous speeds. Surpassing what the human eye could see and propelled by their magic, Naruto and Veto began a constant clash and exchange of blows and slashes, generating small sparks that made the 2 fighters' positions visible. Veto is very excited about this. Since Licht has been injured, I can take out those mages from there. Raya's eyes widened as she watched Veto crash to the ground, flat on his back, staring up at the sky that filtered through the gaps in the wall. I'm still fighting, you know, copy type. The dark blade blocked the white blade. Darkness against wind. The collision made Raya flinch, and she felt her arm go numb from the powerful blow. Yawn, it's surprising that you've kept Veto down long enough to face me. But you haven't eliminated them from the board yet. I never took my eyes off him, man. The shadow loomed over Naruto. Veto of Despair unleashed his bear claw spell on his enemy, shattering the ground and raising a massive cloud of dust. Desperate? I'm not that desperate. The eyes of the third eye members opened. Overcoming the speed of the spell in Veto's body, Naruto reappeared behind the terrorist. Cuts began to appear on the human beast mage's torso. Blood dripped from the wounds, staining the ground at their owner's feet. My eyes are accustomed to speed, huge wild dog. Human. Wind creation magic. Veto's eyes widened as he saw the spell in his opponent's hand. Rasengan. There was no room for the third eye member to escape, nor for his teammates to defend or assist him. He was in range of the Aquamarine Deer's vice captain and was engulfed by a massive dome of blue energy, propelled by it until he crashed against the opposite wall, where he was buried in the rubble. That boy. Within the recovery cocoon Fauna had created, the leader had watched his comrades and strongest members battle Yami, only to see a boy no older than Fauna match the third eye in battle. They hadn't taken any significant damage, nor was there a chance they'd be killed. But seeing how the Magic Knight was performing without him being able to do anything was frustrating. Hey, Baldy. Lick's eyes widened as Naruto pointed the katana at him, completely the center of attention, both by the third eye and the rest. I'm coming for you. So don't move. Naruto jumped, evading Raya's sword and Fauna's spell, focusing on the two remaining members. Beyond, I'll have to level up. Imitation magic. Raya of Betrayal used a magic that allowed him to mimic the magic of others, something relatively powerful and dangerous to the enemies of any user of that style of magic. Because of this, Raya switched from using dark magic to combining it with light magic, gaining speed. Whistle so you're able to imitate everyone else's magic. Naruto and Raya moved. The third eye member began to pressure the Aquamarine Deer vice captain, eventually forcing him to become surrounded. Fauna was on the right and Raya was on the left. Phew, this has really gotten complicated and things have escalated. What's your catchphrase in these cases, Yami? The cigarette smoke left the mouth of the Black Bull's captain, who looked at the blind knight with a disinterested look. Exceed your limits. Exceeding limits. Wind magic. Air cloak air began to surround the vice captain's sword blade. Zone compression. The completely vertical slash, forming 90 degrees from its beginning to 0 at its end. The air disappeared from the area and the oxygen was extinguished during the knight's movement. When the wind blade fully descended, it split the ground in two, and a hurricane-force wind sent the two members of the third eye completely away from it, being struck by thin, sharp threads of air that wounded the skin of each of the mages. Amazing. The Sta, along with Gauche and Finral, were watching the confrontation completely apart from their captain. Brat Asta looked at his captain. I've been watching the other brats battle. He's been trained since he was a child, not just in the use of mana. Like you now, he can sense the Kai of his enemies and has trained his body just like you have. He's a role model for you. With slow steps, Naruto faced the third eye members with a smile, pointing his sword at Licht. His blindfold swayed slightly in the wind. Veto of Despair. Raya of Betrayal. Fauna of Hatred. Licht the Bald. Let's see who brings despair to this battlefield. Chapter 3. Every so often, young people appear with boundless power, unsurpassed skill, or an understanding of mana that no one else can match in 100 or 1,000 years. You know of the Golden Dawn was an example of what some young people had achieved with such boundless skills or powers. The current Wizard King was another example of the geniuses who appeared from time to time, possessing the power to control time. These types of mages were capable of reaching the highest positions within the knightly orders and were recognized as heroes. That's why the captain of the Golden Dawn didn't let Yuno's appearance pass him by, and why Julius ascended to his current position as Wizard King within the Clover Kingdom, becoming the most powerful wizard of all within the kingdom. But some geniuses are recognized only by other geniuses. Naruto, a simple homeless orphan, a human weapon capable of killing anyone with a simple chopstick, was one of these geniuses acknowledged by the Wizard King himself. He had power, he had skill, and he understood mana in a way that Julius himself had never seen anyone do. It was because of the latter that Naruto could cast spells of any range, of any type, and undo them, as if they were nothing more than a small puzzle to him. A genius superior to other geniuses. A genius who only appeared every 1,000 years. Naruto had power, but it wasn't as overwhelming as Julius's, and some saw it as a more delicate, more fluid power. He had skill, but not a skill that could replace experience. As a young man, he fulfilled both in order to overcome his opponents as quickly as he could. And he had an understanding of mana, though he'd known it as chakra when he was just a child. And in his village, all children were trained to understand and use chakra from the moment they entered the military academy, a name too innocent for what it truly was. The young ninjas were trained with weapons, guided to become experts in their use. It was rare for mages to use any weapon unless it was summoned by their grimoire or their own magic. And this quality was present in Naruto and Yami. The younger was trained in the use and history of each weapon, and the elder learned how to use it in his own home before being shipwrecked on the shores of the Clover Kingdom. They were both foreign mages in one form or another, and both wielded weapon magic. Because of this, Yami and Naruto knew each other well and got along well. Beyond this wasn't in the plans. For a magic knight of such a level to simply be a second-class player, where's this kid's data? Raya of Betrayal was puzzled. They had learned of the monoless boy's anti-magic ability and knew the strength standards of an order captain. It was because of that information that they had launched the attack on the royal capital. Why would a mere vice captain be pressuring them? Veto was still alive and unharmed. But the boy had completely knocked him down with a strange spell and had now split the battle zone in two. I hate him. I'll kill him for insulting Licht. Ana del Odio let everyone see why her nickname. Every word and phrase she spoke was linked to the hatred she felt for those who were against her own comrades and her leader, whom she grew to love dearly. For that, we must first finish off this human brat. Veto had emerged from the rubble without any injuries. Despite the strange spell, the third eye member had used a spell to protect himself from the damage the Rasengan could have caused. I'm going to make him despair. Despair, hatred, and betrayal. They are the counterparts of hope, love, and sincerity. But I believe you, Eye of the Midnight Sun, have forgotten something. The glow on Naruto's grimoire faded, allowing the enemies to observe the four leaves within. Luck is the fourth element of our Clover, of the Clover Kingdom. If you wish to defeat us, you will have to surpass what we magic knights are. Mana swirled around the aquamarine deer's vice captain. There wasn't a single scratch on his clothing, nor any sign of fatigue or lack of mana on the boy. He looked as if he had just appeared on the battlefield, as if he hadn't been fighting against the three members of the third eye of the Midnight Sun, which was strange to his opponents and companions. Not even that spell worked, human, Beto punched his abdomen. You haven't overcome the defense of someone blessed by mana. Then Naruto closed his fingers firmly around the handle of his sword. Your fighting style consists of using your overflowing mana as a defense or as an all-out offense. It is marvelous in many ways. However, a cracking sound caught the attention of the three combatants. Blood flooded Beto's mouth as fragments of mana appeared and he fell to his knees, spilling a pool of his own blood onto the ground. My magic doesn't just damage. Rasengan damages to a cellular extent that surpasses almost any armor. It surpasses, of course, solid armor generated by mana, and after piercing through, it strikes my enemy with full power, burning their cells. Incredible, right? Explaining your technique, I'd say it's idiotic. Are you sure, Mr. Hatred? No matter how much I explain my spell, the result will always be the same. It usually ends with my enemy dead, but I see that the dog man named Despair has managed to overcome something that would have killed him without a doubt. None of the words were lies. But the information restriction was strict. Naruto didn't reveal everything about his signature technique or elaborate, as it wasn't exactly a mana-only technique. The user had to have tremendous control and sufficient vitality to perform it, which in his village was once called physical energy, the half that completed chakra. You little bastard. I'm going to achieve your despair through pain. Without a reasonable thought, Beto shot towards Naruto summoning bear claws and intending to gut his enemy, something the vice captain noticed as he sensed the urgency in the beastman's voice. Even your mind is more animal than human. The first blow missed. The second passed over the magic knight's head, slicing through only air, earning Naruto a grunt from Beto's side. Human. Naruto leaped back, gaining space between himself and his opponent. Right behind the Uzumaki, Raya appeared, launching a slash of darkness, only to find an afterimage. Oh? With the use of wind, the vice captain's figure appeared behind Raya. I can bend the air itself and create reflections created by light and water. A mere mirage. Both swords clashed. Fire spiritual magic on Naruto's right side, Fauna of Hatred appeared next to his spear. Salamander Claw. The massive magically generated claw of fire fell upon Naruto, engulfing an area of the field completely in flames, hiding the vice captain's body from Raya's sight and releasing him from its pressure. Ow, ow. I'm falling. Stumbling, Naruto appeared far from the area hit by Fauna's spell, demonstrating his speed and perception despite not having the gift of vision. Beyond how can someone blind even move that well? You haven't caught him. Yami expelled a huge cloud of smoke from his seated position against a huge rock, which rose toward the cave's hollow. He only uses Kai to move. He senses you, both your mana and Kai, and he moves like a dance. Throughout the history of the Clover Kingdom and the Magic Knight Orders, there had never been a mention of a completely blind wizard. Seeing one in action, moving by instinct and perception, was both wonderful and terrifying. Is that what I must focus on, Captain Yami? Exactly, brat. You have to watch what he does, how he does it, how he moves. The boy has been using Kai and Mana to achieve his fighting style for years. Naruto's body moved on its own. His muscles reacted to years of training, years of preparation in various physical fields. Without the gift of sight, the vice captain repelled Raya and Veto's combined attacks, while Fauna tried to incinerate him from a distance. Human. Naruto blocked Veto's right arm with his sword, causing him to lose his weapon, and was pushed by his left arm, being slammed into the ground. Without that sword. The words died in Veto's mouth. Using superhuman strength, breaking through Veto's despair mana defense, Naruto delivered a direct blow to his enemy's face, sending him flying backward. The warrior worth his salt, a fighter who loves battle, doesn't rely on a weapon or magic. Following his instinct, Naruto turned his face away and evaded the blade of Raya's sword. He simply fights until he can't go on. Raya opened his eyes as Naruto's arms wrapped around his limb. Being pulled from his position, he felt his back hit the ground as his opponent's arm lock moved and his mouth filled with blood. Fire struck Naruto's back. The vice captain moved his arm and guided the wind to cut through the fire that was trying to burn him. I hate you. Wind control allows me to eliminate any flame. Fire feeds on oxygen, and I can make that disappear with a couple of complex spells. A blink. Anna felt her breath drain from her breathing becoming more difficult in the absence of oxygen. Within 3 minutes, she found herself on her knees, struggling to breathe, tears spilling from the corners of her eyes. Wind control gives complete control of the air. Removing oxygen and killing someone is too simple for us mages who can have this control of the area. The choking sound disappeared and in its place a sigh of relief took the place of the witch's agonized moans. You have awfully good control, kid. What's your name? Enveloped in Fauna's regenerative flames, Licht spoke directly to the Aquamarine Deer's vice captain, intrigued by the young man's ability. Not even he, as an elf, had such control over mana. Naruto Uzumaki, vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer. For a split second, the eyes of the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun widened, reflecting a feeling of surprise and intrigue at that name. You should serve a better cause, Naruto. Changing his attitude completely, Licht tried to convince the knight of his loyalties. A gift like that shouldn't be serving the Clover Kingdom. A gift like that shouldn't be at anyone's service, really, Naruto replied. I am a magic knight, a member of the Aquamarine Deer. With my oath of loyalty, I serve the Wizard King and the Clover Kingdom in any conflict, against any enemy, even if I have to give my life for it. I'd say I'm surprised by that willingness, knowing we can eliminate you. But your family has never broken an oath. Sighing, Licht realized he couldn't use the boy as an ally. We'll have to eliminate you then. We mustn't allow you to grow fully, boy. Oh? A shower of lightsabers rained down upon the young man. Naruto, using wind magic, moved around the imitation magic user's attack, deflecting some of the attacks with a wind field around him. Beyond if Licht says not to let you live, we'll have to. Beto appeared behind the Uzumaki. His right arm was surrounded by his beast magic, forming the bear claw, which was part of his strategy in close combat. Despair, human. Sensing his opponent's Kai, Naruto ducked out of inertia. He placed his hands on the ground and evaded the second attack by doing a circus somersault, landing on top of Veto. You lack elegance, dog boy. Imitation magic. Black blade. Using light magic, Raya appeared behind Naruto with his sword above his head, preparing a downward slash to eliminate his target. The terrorist mage swung his sword down, intending to cut the magic knight in two. Veto's eyes widened, and Raya clicked his tongue. The attack he attempted to use against Naruto landed directly on his own comrade's body, and Veto crashed to the ground, feeling his ribs fracture. Mirage, guys. Naruto appeared with his katana again. Unable to evade due to surprise in the moment, Raya felt his skin being cut, his flesh screaming in agony, and he was forced to use Licht's magic to escape and avoid being cut in two. The piercing cut had left its mark on Third Eye's member, who now held his abdomen as blood seeped between his fingers. I didn't expect this. Aren't I great, yawns, dog. Raya and Veto narrowed their eyes into slits. It was clear Naruto was mocking them, trying to get them to move impulsively so they could continue receiving wounds on their bodies so they could die at his hand. Licht. Let me kill the brat, let me. No, Veto, the leader understood what his companion meant. It's not a time to use it in this place, not yet at least, and not with someone like him. The Boldy's looking down on me, huh? He swung his katana, scattering Raya's blood across the stony ground. If you two don't drink this, Third Eye, I'll have to show you guys why Clover's still at the top of the food chain, you little minnows. Before Veto could react, Naruto was in front of him, swinging the katana perpendicular to the ground, slicing through space in a horizontal slash that shattered sound itself with a whistling sound and pierced the mana-formed armor that enveloped the Third Eye member. The grotesque sound accompanied Veto's roar of despair as his skin was pierced, his flesh cut, and his left lung completely pierced by the blade, being shredded by the wind that wrapped around the katana like a cloak. Ah, human. Veto's thick muscular arms gripped the vice captain's well-formed limbs. Dog. The grinding of teeth was a musical sound to the Uzumaki. He felt his opponent's fingers tighten on his forearms, trying to shatter them with sheer physical force. But he wasn't the only one capable of generating a sheath with his mana. As if struck by a current, Veto pulled away from Naruto as he felt his hands being cut by the mana coating that enveloped him. His limbs had been severed, creating a bloody sheath around both of his hands. You're good. I'll give you that much, brat. But we still have something to fight for, something to strive for. A dream, huh? Naruto scratched the back of his neck. He had a dream too. Everyone did. Fighting for an ideal or a dream is something I admire and respect. However, I can't take your words seriously. You're holding back. Overcoming Veto's eyes and Raya's reaction, Naruto struck the former's stomach using the Rasengan again, enveloping his opponent in an explosion of blue mana that ended with the third eye member lying on the ground and with severe injuries all over his body. Yawn, you're not killing us. Veto will recover from that in a few minutes. Oh, I see the wound I inflicted on you has fully recovered, lazy fellow. Soon your partner will wake up and the two-legged dog will get up. We can continue playing. Yawn, it would be something interesting. However, as you said, we're holding back even in this form. I think we wanted to see what you were capable of, and Licht himself has pointed out that we should eliminate you. Now, taking things seriously is too much of a hassle. But I have to do it. You're a stumbling block in the path of our goal. Haha, thanks for the compliment, but I already have a maid to woo. Raya's sword collided with Naruto's. Yawn, let's see how you can move at the true speed of light. Raya. End his life now. Before the eyes of the small audience, the sword dance began following the direct and urgent order from the leader of the Eye of the Nightshade. Following those words, that phrase accompanied by a slight tone of command, Raya began to move using light magic and began to pressure his opponent with movements beyond the human eye, beyond the speed of sound, and even the speed of light itself. This has gotten complicated. The aquamarine deer brat has gotten too confident. The Black Bull's captain had been analyzing the entire fight, every resulting move, and drawing his own conclusions about the possible outcomes. It was clear that the third eye was powerful, that its three members were far superior to their leader in battle, and that Naruto playing with them could only have happened if they themselves wanted to. But the third eye had grown tired of playing and had begun to move on from the warm-up to the real showdown. Perhaps, being self-centered, Naruto let them grow. Will the tomato-headed boy live? I have to help him. No, brat. You'd be a hindrance to the dear boy now and you'd change the flow of the entire fight. It's better if we focus on another target to take down. Naruto skidded across the ground. Bending his knees, he dodged the following slashes and leaped through the debris, his legs swathing in the wind, trying to distance himself from Raya's constant pursuit and attacks. Huh? You kinda ripped my clothes. And they were my favorite. Forming another black cleaver, Raya attempted to split his opponent in half. But as before, he found himself hitting the ground instead of his target. Yawn, can't even use the light to reach you. This is getting to be a real pain. It's not that you can't reach me. The cuts in the Uzumaki's clothing were proof that his opponent was slightly correct. He wasn't causing any wounds that would be a problem for the blonde. But he was hitting him constantly and generating some light cuts. It's that I'm sensitive to everything around me. Since childhood, Naruto had had to navigate the world without the gift of sight. He had trained in the arts of his village with this handicap and had grown up creating a system with which to perceive his enemies' movements. He learned to perceive Kai unconsciously and began to let his body move, sensing the mana that completely surrounded the battle zone. Bringing both perceptions together, Naruto created what he called the Dance of the Wind God, a style of battle and lifestyle that could only be used if one did not have the gift of vision, if one was completely blind. And he had practiced it for years. Beyond, that fighting style of yours is really annoying and too persistent. You're moving better, perceiving better, and understanding better every time. You grow during the fight and you've always played us a few steps ahead, even surpassing my mobility with light magic. Haha, thanks. Embarrassed, Naruto scratched the back of his neck as his cheeks showed a redness caused by his opponent's words. I guess you could take that as a compliment, Raya sighed. Using imitation magic constantly only makes me better at it and more understanding of it. You're welcome for this moment of practice, lazy guy. The third eye of the Midnight Sun had been surpassed by a single magic knight, all of them. Naruto had proven to be far more in tune with mana and overwhelmed his opponents with his battle prowess, leaving his enemies out of the fight. Yawn licked. Should we continue the fight? This kid is too troublesome without us showing what we really have up our sleeves. Licht had come to that conclusion. He could force his companions to give their all, to reveal their hidden power, and they would have to use their true power against him. But what if that didn't work either? He still needed those three to carry out his plans. Before Naruto and Raya could move to restart the fight, a space hole appeared above Licht. "I knew you would do that, Yami of the Black Bulls." Smoke escaped from between the foreign magician's lips. "I'm glad you thought so." So the dwarf has moved. Making the massive anti-magic slash from his grimoire, Asta struck Licht's side using all his strength, breaking the ribs of the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun and surprising the semi-recovered members of the Third Eye. Darkness magic. Cloak of Darkness. Black Blade. Licht couldn't react to the second attack. Yami unleashed a completely vertical slash, sending the man crashing to the ground in an explosion of debris and dust. Light. The Third Eye reacted with shock and pain. Their leader and beloved had been struck and wounded, sent crashing to the ground, and unable to recover from his previous injuries. "Those two are really amazing. I like them." Naruto smiled. He'd felt Asta and Yami's Kai as they moved between his attacks and the Third Eye's, as well as their spatial magic, when the captain was sent after Licht. That's why he wasn't too surprised when Asta punched the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun or when Yami attacked him as a distraction. We're in a bit of trouble here. The blow with the anti-magic sword had unleashed Licht's true power. A power their leader's body wasn't prepared to withstand. He would die if this continued. Wow. This has gotten too bright. Placing his left hand like a visor over, Naruto looked down at Licht, who was rising above the ground, wrapped in a cocoon of mana that gave the image of a massive future explosion that could send Naren disappearing from the map. "I really didn't expect this." Removing the cigarette from his mouth, Yami watched the result of his attack without flinching one bit. "Captain Yami. Don't despair, brat. Not yet." Raya. Beto looked urgently at his partner. I know. Let's move now or we won't be able to continue with the plan in the future." Raya looked at Naruto for a single second. "We'll finish this in the future." Naruto didn't move. In response to a future confrontation, the vice captain sheathed his katana, allowing the Third Eye members to take up positions. Perhaps he could end Licht's life by using one of his spells, but without knowing the full results, he couldn't afford to go down that path if it meant harming his teammates. Sealing magic. Trinity magic seal. Forming a triangle, Fauna, Raya and Veto began a sealing spell on their leader, about to explode, containing their comrade's magical power before his body disintegrated. They still had to go through with the plan, with the rebirth. A stamp, huh? It's ingenious and unexpected. But I guess we've saved ourselves from almost certain death. After sealing off the potential explosion, the Eye of the Midnight Sun disappeared from the battle zone, leaving the Clover Knights to watch the destruction of the battle. "I'm a little tired," Naruto collapsed, looking up at the sky, toward a carriage made of steel magic. "Reinforcements have arrived." Chapter 4. Knights with immense magical power could be counted on the fingers of one hand, as could genies. Notably, nobles possessed immense reserves of mana and had overwhelming power over commoners. Rarely did commoners possess power similar to that of nobles, or even similar reserves. The Third Eye, the Eye of the Midnight Sun's most powerful group, demonstrated in their battle that they possessed an enormous amount of mana and immense power. The mana of each member of the group was dense enough to physically enhance their wielders. Veto demonstrated this ability by withstanding Naruto's constant cuts, attacks, and spells, even surviving, thanks to his regeneration, the partial disintegration of his left lung, which would be fatal to any normal human. Blessed by mana. That phrase had been the Beastman's constant refrain during his confrontation with the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer. He demonstrated this point by surviving 2 cell-shattering attacks and a punctured lung that nearly killed him. They were all necessary for Licht's future plan. None of them could die without first finding the magic stones and harming the Clover Kingdom. Following the battle between the Eye of the Midnight Sun and the Magic Knights, Licht was placed in a coma and placed in a capsule to recover from his injuries. His power was completely sealed by the Third Eye, and his recovery began as soon as they arrived at their base of operations. Those wounds, that battle, resulted in Licht becoming stronger, having much more power than he had shown in his fight against Yami of the Black Bulls and his confrontation against Julius. The Magic Knights emerged victorious from the first great confrontation. But the members of the Third Eye knew that this fight had not been with their true power, with their true strength. If they had used their true form and if Licht hadn't restrained himself, the Magic Knights would have been defeated and wiped off the face of the earth. The goal Licht was striving for, the reason he formed the Eye of the Midnight Sun, hadn't changed. That setback wasn't something that should bother or worry them. They lost the first direct encounter, but they found some juicy information they had to work with from now on if they wanted to move forward. Uzumaki. Raya had seen Licht's reaction when the boy gave his name. Naruto Uzumaki, a name he would undoubtedly remember long after his rebirth. He was probably going to have to fight him again, and even though he didn't love battle like Vedo did, he wanted to face him. He didn't understand it, but the flames of rivalry had been born in his heart. I'm going to kill everyone who's ever hurt Licht. I hate them, all of them. With one hand on the recovery capsule where Licht was unconscious, Fauna looked at her third eye companions, without showing any emotion beyond the purest hatred that could exist in a person. Not even the third eye could defeat the magic knights. Ha. The sigh left Volto's lips, and the third eye looked at the zombie-using mage. Raid seemed to sneer at them and annoyed that they hadn't been able to finish off the very knights who had halted their attack on the royal capital. Raids. This isn't the time for this. Your hatred of the capital and the knights isn't something we're going to take into account moving forward. You'd be eliminated if you weren't needed. Licht was in a coma, recovering from the injuries caused by Yami and Asta's blow. Raid's Burrito's words had slightly upset Third Eye and, anticipating any disaster from Vedo, Voltos tried to calm the situation. They still had to follow through with the established plan, and Raids was someone they needed to complete it. Every member was needed. TCH. Licht was beloved by all members of the Eye of Midnight's Sun. But the three strongest members, the Third Eye, worshipped him as a kind of god, a savior of the world they were meant to protect, a messiah reborn to keep the blessing of mana upon them and wipe the heretics from the face of the earth. We should take into account Licht's words about the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer. You don't usually take this seriously, Raya. Voltos looked at the black-haired Third Eye member. You haven't even yawned when you've spoken. It's something odd about your unusual behavior. Raya yawned with every sentence he spoke, whenever he had something to say, or during any fight. Throughout his battle against Yami and, later, Naruto, he yawned non-stop every time he spoke or mentioned something. It could be considered a tic, something he already had. But when necessary, Raya was able to control the urge to yawn and continue speaking in a fluid and normal manner. Licht kept an eye on him. When the boy called himself that, it's as if he remembered something important and was trying to tell us. I want to keep the night under control as much as possible. When Licht wakes up, he'll be able to explain the reason for his fear. Fear? Vedo looked at his companion in disbelief, not understanding his words. Since he met Licht, his leader never showed a hint of fear and was completely sure of what he was doing at all times. I don't understand your words, Raya. Licht has never felt fear, he hasn't lost his way. Don't slander someone who can't defend himself. She's not slandering him, Vedo. Raya's words are true. Licht feared the boy as soon as he mentioned his name. What other motive would he have for wanting to eliminate him from the battle so quickly? There's no other motive but fear, Vedo. The Third Eye boasted the most powerful members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. Licht confirmed this during his confrontation with Yami, when his companions came to rescue him from certain death that would prevent his rebirth. A man with power close to three wizards like them feared a young man in his late 20s just because of one word, a surname that seemed to echo in the wizard's mind. It's best to investigate. It's not the name, but the surname that upset Licht. The reaction of his leader and friend was a complete mystery to Voltos. As the Third Eye, he was puzzled by Licht's behavior after the mention of the word Uzumaki, as if it meant something to him. Sally can help you with the investigation into the strange vice captain of the Magic Knights. The secondary objective for the Eye of the Midnight Sun and the Third Eye was to obtain all the information about Naruto Uzumaki available in the country, about his ancestry and surname, as well as the history of the house to which he belonged. And it was certainly something primordial. Raya, the imitation mage, stopped in his tracks at Volto's call. I don't want you to set your mind to fighting that boy again. Licht needs you by his side, and someone needs to take the reins of the organization now that he's gone. You don't need to remind me, Voltos. I don't need a babysitter now that Licht's resting. As a member of the Third Eye, I know exactly what I must do to ensure Licht's plan. That's what we expect from you, Raya. Licht was in an induced coma in a recovery tank. The Eye of the Midnight Sun was currently leaderless, and Voltos feared this would negatively impact his plans. Without Licht, only Raya had the charisma to lead the organization in the absence of its true leader, something Voltos knew all too well, urging the Third Eye member to lead the group. But Raya hated being subject to another's expectations. She only served Licht's cause, her own reason for existing. To eradicate the Clover Kingdom in a hellish struggle, and anything completely different from that wasn't part of her own plans. The Eye of the Midnight Sun, as well as Licht himself, were on a quest to find the magic stones, artifacts that would help them return to their former selves and bring complete peace to the world once they overthrew the evil that was the Clover Kingdom and the Wizard King. It was because of these artifacts that Licht ordered an attack on the royal capital and fought directly against the captain of the Crimson Lion. Currently, of the stones needed to proceed with the plan Licht had laid out, they only needed to find 3 to complete the tablet and be reborn as they truly were, as who they truly were in their current form. But to achieve that, they had to obtain the missing stones and continue with the plan without interruption despite Licht's absence. I know they'll notice your absence. Outside the recovery room, Raya spoke directly to the two Third Eye members and Voltos. I'll take your place and divert their suspicions. I'll keep them away from Licht for a while until we obtain the remaining stones. Raya was confident he'd be able to allay Licht's suspicions and buy them the time they needed to gather the rest of the stones they were to use for the slab. They had them located and they just needed to make sure they got them without any obstacles. The Magic Knights of the Clover Kingdom were persistent, stubborn, and few of them took defeat with a straight face or accepted their inability to achieve victory. Raya was certain they would have to fight them again at every location where a magic stone lay. The Wizard King was not a commander who left everything to chance, as he demonstrated in every war he had fought to date. I'll be able to fight him again. Obsession filled Raya's mind since his confrontation against Naruto Uzumaki, the only blind magic knight in the entire history of the Clover Kingdom and one of the best swordsmen he had ever met, because while Yami lost his katana, Naruto was able to use his sword without the fear of it breaking in two like the Black Bull captains. Yami had proven himself on par with Licht in power. He held his own against the three members of the Third Eye for several minutes and showed no despair at the impossibility of a clear victory like other knights who had fought against them. That same composure had been present in Naruto. The boy appeared calm, relaxed, confident in himself and his ability to achieve victory, managing to injure them throughout the encounter. If Licht had let me use my power. Being mortified about them now won't restore Licht's health or erase our defeat, Beto. Beto of Despair's ego and pride had been partially wounded. In the fight against the vice-captain of the Aquamarine Stag, he was the one who received the worst blows and injuries and ended up falling to his knees, prostrating himself before the enemy as if he had been defeated, as if he had finally paid homage to a simple knight of the club. Just thinking about it, remembering it, made his blood boil under his skin and made him want to drive the boy who had subdued him to despair, who had made him look like a mere idiot. Beto was strong, extremely strong. His mana covered him like armor. If he had to be defined as an animal, he would be the king of the jungle, a lion ready to tear his prey to pieces with his sharp bloodthirsty fangs. Next time I'll tear that human to pieces. It wasn't just Raya who felt a fire burning inside him. More prone to fighting, Beto had nailed a target on Naruto's face and it was his goal to accomplish before ending Licht's plan. He wanted to destroy the vice-captain with his bare hands, without help from his teammates, and prove that he was despair. Sinking him in that feeling and killing him was a vision Beto relished in his own mind. He's a blessed boy in a way. Mana has protected him, guided him to become what he is today. We must analyze the boy's entire history, find his weaknesses to exploit. Licht would want it that way. Licht is not dead. Licht is currently in a coma, Beto. Our objective hasn't changed. Even with Licht's condition, we must obtain the remaining stones to complete our plan. Obtain the remaining magic stones, be reborn, and overthrow the Clover Kingdom. The Third Eye was currently in charge of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, and they were willing to go along with Licht's plan, even though he was in an induced coma while recovering from his injuries from their previous confrontation. If the Eye of Midnight obtained all the magic stones, the Clover Kingdom would be completely eradicated and its royal line would be exterminated without a trace. Few would believe this was possible, but the Third Eye, the members of the Eye of Midnight, and Licht himself, were confident they could achieve their goal. They were so confident that they would give their lives to fulfill the long-cherished dream they were chasing. The problem the Magic Knights had was that there were traitors to the kingdom among them. The Eye of the Midnight Sun had members installed throughout the kingdom, ready to move whenever Licht gave the order. It was thanks to these traitors that the mages protecting the royal capital defected, allowing them to attack the kingdom's capital with all their available force. Because of that betrayal, Fugolian Vermilion was seriously wounded and placed in a coma to recover, and the Eye of the Midnight Sun obtained one of the missing stones. They were well on their way to achieving their personal goal. Royal Capital. Captain's Meeting. The captains of the Magic Knight Orders of the Clover Kingdom met on special occasions, never for their own interests, but always at the request of the Wizard King, who was supposed to keep his subordinates informed of the kingdom's actions against its adversaries or of the actions of the enemies surrounding them. The Diamond Kingdom had been stealthily moving toward the borders with the Clover Kingdom, and the Wizard King had not failed to observe these movements by one of its enemies, much less when that same enemy tried to seize the magic hidden in a dungeon a few months ago. The presence of that young man who had nearly killed 6 knights was a cause for concern. Julius had been researching the young man who could heal an attack with diamonds, but because of the terrorist group, his priorities had shifted toward this new villain for the protection of his people. They were still recovering from the recent movement of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, and one of the orders was without its captain, which prevented them from moving with the full power of the Clover Kingdom against any invasion. This didn't pose any pressing concern to the Wizard King. Julius trusted people like William Vengeance, captain of the Golden Dawn, and Yami Sukahiro, captain of the Black Bull, to deal with any threat, or he would have if he didn't know that, among the 9 captains, one of them had orchestrated the attack on the royal capital and indirectly caused the near death of Hegolian, a man who could aspire to become the next Wizard King. Julius had hoped with all his might that his suspicions were simply unfounded, but the information obtained thanks to the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer and that obtained from the inmates of the Eye of the Midnight Sun thanks to Asta only confirmed suspicions that could lead to the destruction of the kingdom itself if they came to light. It was for this reason that the Wizard King kept all his movements a complete secret from the rest of the captains, giving the information only to his 2 trusted people. Marx and Naruto, who helped him despite some complaints from the latter, who had not been very keen to see that mission through to a successful conclusion. With all the information in hand, Julius gathered the captains in front of the 2 reclusive members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. He now knew the identity of the traitor and could look into his eyes, seeing how he didn't know he was being pursued and about to be hunted. "Beyond Julius, can we get this over with? I have some ramen getting cold in my home." Disrespectful. Naruto could feel the captain's gazes on him, as if he were nothing more than a mere insect who shouldn't be treating the Wizard King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, and the one who had led Clover in the previous wars, with such familiarity. Naruto. Ril Bismortier, captain of the Aquamarine Deer, looked at his subordinate with a piercing gaze. Ril was usually a cheerful boy, the same age as his vice captain. But despite taking many things like a teenager, the captain still maintained formality with the Wizard King. "You should show more respect to the Wizard King." "Yes. All right, Captain." Ril knew perfectly well that Naruto wouldn't follow his orders or advice. Since being promoted to vice captain by the previous captain of the order, his companion had been too free with his actions. Although Ril himself didn't blame Naruto. The boy was skilled, completed missions, and could be considered an exemplary knight for future generations. But that was Ril's thought, as he knew the blind young man in front of them perfectly. Nozzle, captain of the Silver Eagle, and William, captain of the Golden Dawn, remained reluctant at his words, looking cryptically at the boy, one remembering his actions against his brothers and the other annoyed at having lost such a diamond in the rough. "One of you is a traitor." Julius looked at the faces of the 8 captains before him. They still didn't have a representative for the Crimson Lion, although as the Wizard King, he had already sought out a suitable replacement, though he should accept the proposal. "Untraitor, eh?" Smoke escaped from the Black Bull captain's mouth as he removed the cigar from his lips. Yami Sukahiro's eyes showed no annoyance at being partially accused, at being considered a traitor by the Wizard King. On the contrary, his dark eyes showed understanding and interest in the Wizard King's words. "Hegolian is out." Charlotte Roseley, captain of the Blue Rose, understood that her comrade couldn't be the traitor. Hurting himself and his brother for such an objective would be too base for a man of Hegolian's character. "That's exactly right. Hegolian isn't the traitor. Of the 8 of you, only one has been involved in shady dealings in the Clover Kingdom. Only one of you managed to have the mages in charge of the barrier removed, leaving us defenseless." Naruto's soft words filled the room. Anyone else would have been upset at being pushed aside, but not Julius. He was pleased by the leadership nature the teenager displayed under certain circumstances. "And one of you is too enormous to avoid being pointed at by a simple finger." Without hesitation, the vice captain's index finger pointed directly at the enormous captain of the Purple Orca. Gelder Poiset, the man who was accused of corruption. "What? That's a fallacy." Elder attempted to defend himself against the accusations. The rest of the captains had moved on, leaving only Gelder to face Naruto's accusing finger. "Fallacy?" The vice captain's arm slowly lowered. "I've never told a fallacy in my life, sir. Except when you dyed Walter de Rosa's hair. That was fun." "Eyes." Sorry, Naruto scratched the back of his neck in embarrassment, accepting Marx's scolding. "I went off on a tangent a bit and gave the purple idiot hope Gelder knew about Naruto's blindness." But when the boy moved his head towards him again, he felt the weight of a ton on his shoulders, being sent to his knees on the ground, suffocating from the lack of oxygen. "Trying to escape using that invisibility magic on me is useless. I'm like a walking radar and I've removed all the oxygen from where you are. Well, I've left some so you don't die, of course. I'm not that cruel." Stopping the steps he had begun to take, Naruto crouched down in front of Gelder Poiset and tilted his head to the right, showing a calm smile at the traitor captain's frightened gaze. "Theft, extortion, bribery, and many other misdeeds, like setting up a red light district you tried to hide. Too bad I'm good at espionage, that I can sense people's lies, and that the wise man trusts me enough to screw you over." Confidence, calm, and presence. More than one of the captains, including Ril, expressed concern at the tone of the vice captain's words. Words that displayed too much confidence to the point of allowing him to stand before the kneeling traitor. This is madness, taking in as much air as possible. Poised looked at that smile, those perfectly white teeth. The captain felt his heart pounding, his lungs trying to find a gram of oxygen to stay awake. It's simply madness. I didn't help the terrorists, I didn't. Indirectly, you did. The smile disappeared. I don't like magic knights. Their disdain for those they call commoners sickens me too much, you know. Slowly, Naruto dropped his chin into his hands. But you know. My old instructor had a phrase that is burned into my mind. In the world, those who break the rules are scum, it's true. But those who abandon a friend are worse than scum. You have abandoned your comrades, your kingdom, and your people. You have used them out of selfishness and self-interest, dishonoring everything that made you a knight. You have spit on the work of others and insulted those who gave their lives for the mantle you wear. Naruto stood up again and turning on his heels, turned his back on the current captain of the Purple Orca. For all I care, they can execute you, scum. Elder Poised fell unconscious. Chapter 5. The Magic Knight Orders of the Clover Kingdom were a completely hierarchical organization, with a captain and vice-captain respectively leading the order and granting missions to the other members according to importance and rank. Each order captain was connected only to the Wizard King, who was superior to the 9 captains and vice-captains of the order and was the highest authority of the Magic Knights. Among Magic Knights, there are ranks awarded based on their performance in missions and their behavior during them. The lowest of all ranks would be Lower Magic Knight of rank 5, with each rank placed between a 5 and 1 interval. This rank is awarded to all knights who enter a knightly order, those chosen by each of the 9 knight orders in service to the kingdom. The next knight rank is that of Intermediate Magic Knight, awarded to those who have spent time serving orders within one of the 9 squads in service to the Wizard King. The Superior Magic Knight would be the next rank. Within this rank, knights already possess a high level of power and experience on the battlefield, carrying on their shoulders a long list of missions and recognition from their peers and the Wizard King himself. At the last step up to Wizard King is the Grand Magic Knight, a rank held by the captains of each order, as well as the vice-captains who have the rank of Superior Magic Knight of rank 1, these titles being the highest a knight can achieve without reaching the title of Wizard King. Throughout the history of the Magic Knight orders, there has never been a Grand Magic Knight who wasn't an order captain. Likewise, there has never been a vice-captain who wasn't a rank 1 Superior Magic Knight. The captain and vice-captain were expected to be the strongest knights within their order, capable of leading it in extreme circumstances and capable of overcoming any adversity. Currently, of the 9 knight orders, 2 are without a captain to lead them, without someone the Mago King could completely trust. Betrayals create rifts, and Julius wanted to avoid further breaches of trust for his subordinates. The Order of the Purple Orca would soon find a captain to lead them. Marx had been charged with reviewing the backgrounds of each of its members for the appropriate captain selection, leaving all the ballots on the vice-captain of the order. However, Julius couldn't think of anyone to lead the Crimson Lion Order. Young Leopold was too young to command an order, and the vice-captain wasn't a charismatic man like the Vermilions. And the thought of Hegolian's sister wasn't something Julius could fully accept. She was far too intense when she wanted to be, which was almost all the time. Leona Vermilion, a powerful, strong woman raised in a complete wild state, was the complete opposite of her brothers. Julius could see that this woman was truly powerful, accepted from a point of view linked to the power she possessed within her. Contrary to Hegolian's calm, natural-born leader, Leona had a more explosive wild nature and a love of a good battle. The Vermilion had led the Crimson Lion since its founding, just as the Sylvis had led the Silver Eagle. Julius couldn't see Leona as the captain of the Crimson Lion currently. He needed someone like Hegolian. Calm, analytical, someone who could be a candidate for Wizard King in the coming years, someone who commanded trust. And he had thought of the perfect Magic Knight to lead the order, though to do so, he would have to form a transfer from one order to another. It wasn't very common for a mage to be transferred from their original order to another, although there had been some very rare cases. Typically, the knight who joined an order ended up dying in service to that order, spending his entire life serving the Magic Knights in the robes of the order that had chosen him when he began his journey as a mage in service to the Clover. Julius hoped his decision wouldn't create a schism between the new captain's home order and the Crimson Lion. He also didn't want to see his younger brother, Leopold, feel inferior for not being chosen as the order's captain. "You called me, wise man?" The vice-captain of the Crimson Lion stood in the Wizard King's office, wearing the robes of his order, his hair slightly disheveled, and a face that had more wrinkles than Julius remembered from when he first met him. "Randall, vice-captain of the Crimson Lion. How has the Lion Order been without its captain?" Julius wasn't a man who wanted to hurt his subordinates or bring up their worst moments. But as a Wizard King, he had an obligation to have all the information about his followers and allies so he could make the best decisions, just as he was about to do now. "Not well, sir. Leopold is upset about what happened to his brother, and even though we're magic knights, spirits aren't so high without Lord Figolian lurking around the base. The Crimson Lion had a wound that was taking too long to heal. Figolian had been one of the men admired by all the knights, even if they didn't belong to the same order as him. He was a man who led, whom everyone followed, even Nozzle Silva and his brothers. Replacing a man like the captain of the Crimson Lion was a nearly impossible task. Almost, since Julius knew all his subordinates perfectly, even forming close bonds with more than one of them. That's something I'm sorry to hear, Randall. Figolian has been a captain in my service for years. He'll recover soon, of that you can be sure. Bringing encouragement, boosting the morale of his men. Julius knew his duties as a battlefield general. He was a captain of orders and now led all the knight orders in service to the kingdom. I've called you on an urgent matter, Randall. What's this about, sir? Randall had accompanied Figolian to various meetings and had been with him on various battlefields. He could see in the Wizard King's eyes what he was about to propose, what he was about to command, and he agreed even without having heard the words of the man in front of him. He knew himself. He knew he couldn't lead the Crimson Lion without Figolian, and he didn't have the skills to overcome what the order was suffering with his absence. He didn't have the charisma to lead his men, nor the willpower of his senior. I want to propose someone to lead the order in Figolian's absence. He's young, but he's proven himself a competent magic knight while serving as vice captain of the Aquamarine Stag. Randall's eyes widened slightly. He knew the Aquamarine Stag's vice captain from Leopold and Figolian. Are you referring to the blind boy who caused problems with the Silva brothers? At the mention of Naruto, Randall's attitude changed drastically, becoming very cautious about the Wizard King's offer order. The rivalry between Nozzle Silva and Figolian Vermilion was known to everyone in the Clover Kingdom. It was a rivalry that had transcended time, fueled by the two royal families. Silva and Vermilion were always competing, always trying to see who was better than the other, and then taking it to their heirs, their eldest children. Naruto Uzumaki. His final act was to prevent the deaths of Yami Sukahiro and some of his subordinates by keeping the Third Eye, a group of prominent mages of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, at bay. The feat hidden from the rest of the people who had escaped the Wizard King's trust. Julius had been overly cautious in sharing this information, becoming almost reluctant to say anything about the event after discovering the traitor, fearful that there might be someone else among the various orders. However, the Wizard King knew that to convince Randall and the members of the Crimson Lion, he had to show what the boy was capable of achieving. But, sir, would the captain of the Aquamarine Stag agree to give us the boy? Randall looked at the Wizard King's face. As a member of the Crimson Lion, he had to prevent any member of another order from leading his own. He was the vice captain of the Crimson Lion, the man Figolian had placed his trust in. I cannot accept just anyone within our order taking the place of our captain. Like real lions, the members of the Crimson Lion had their own pride, their own way of doing things. This way and pride were established by the previous captains, fully represented by Figolian Vermilion, the man everyone in the Clover Kingdom wanted to follow, the one all the magic knights respected. Figolian had achieved his status through his hard work as a magic knight. He wasn't a man who squandered his time, nor a knight who looked down on people based on their social standing or their amount of magical power. Whenever someone mentioned Figolian, they mentioned the Wizard King. In some strange way, the two men were similar, yet different. Naruto is a good boy, a great knight in service to the Clover Kingdom. He probably has problems with his vision. But he's made up for even that. Braille had helped blind people communicate with others and grow in society even without the gift of sight. Naruto had gone a step further, reaching levels that others with his same disability couldn't. And it was all thanks to the use of Kai and the mana that surrounded him. Using both, the young vice captain created a radar that gave him the exact location of any enemy, any person, or object that was surrounding him. Julius admired that system, the boy's determination to create something others hadn't even thought of. When he saw the young man use it for the first time, he was amazed by his fighting style, by the fluidity with which he moved around the battlefield, around obstacles. Mister. I can force you to accept the boy into your ranks. Julius leaned back in his seat. As the Wizard King, I must ensure the safety of the kingdom. An order without a captain is an order that cannot be mobilized in battle. Currently, members of the Diamond Kingdom have been prowling the border with us. We could be on the brink of war. I cannot allow one of the squadrons to be without a direct leader. Julius didn't want to belittle Randall's work, his performance as a vice captain. But throughout his time as Wizard King, he had seen numerous men like Randall. Indecisive, unable to take the reins when their captain fell in battle, when he was injured in a confrontation. These types of men, although good at following orders, could lead their comrades to certain death. Something Julius wasn't willing to allow to happen. I don't know if the captain's sister is proud of being rejected as captain. Especially when the chosen one is a blind commoner. The wind in the room stirred slightly. The robes of both men stirred, revealing the garments beneath the cloak the wise man wore over his clothes. I should be offended if I hadn't been called worse things. Randall shifted alertly, his face drawn and sweat running down his right temple. Sitting in an empty chair, wearing his aquamarine deer robes, Naruto made an appearance at the private meeting between the Crimson Lion Vice Captain and the Wizard King, something any other man would have taken offense to. Julius, however, showed a brief smile that Randall missed. "Mr. Randall, may I present to you the Vice Captain of the Aquamarine Deer, one of our finest magic knights. Naruto Uzumaki." The young knight's attire hadn't changed since he'd appeared at the award ceremony. Black pants, black sandals, and a form-fitting, unadorned black undershirt. The only distinctive features were the tunic hanging from the young man's shoulders, as well as the blindfold covering the boy's eyes. "It's a pleasure, Randall-san." Reaching out towards the Crimson Lion's member, Naruto attempted to bury the hatchet that the vice captain under Figolian's command had initially tried to unearth. Randall looked at that calloused hand, rough for a young man of almost 20. After a long, hard look at it, the vice captain looked at the young man's face. 6 marks stood out on that sharp, lightly tanned face, giving the impression that they were the whiskers of a cat or some kind of feline. "It's a pleasure." Randall finally accepted his new captain's handshake. It wasn't an easy decision. But the Wizard King had tried to make it his own turn to accept, rather than impose his own ideas. "It will be a pleasure to work with you, Uzumaki-sama." "No need for such a formal honorific, Randall. We're going to be battle buddies, brothers in arms." In Naruto's case, brother in arms was a completely literal phrase. He wore his katana, sheathed in black, on the left side of his waist, almost hidden from his opponent's view due to his black clothing. "Now that everything is settled, I have matters to attend to with the new Captain Randall. Here is this letter, which will explain Lord Uzumaki's duties within your order." Randall stared at the missive. He let go of his new captain's hand and accepted it with a lump in his throat. He wasn't afraid of Leopold's or the rest of the squadron's reaction. What he feared, like everyone else, was how Mereoleona would react to the news that her brother would be temporarily replaced and that she wasn't the one replacing him. "I will give it to young Leo, wise man." The vice captain twisted his torso forward, bowing completely to the man in front of him. After saluting the king, the man repeated the same salute to his new captain before leaving the room. "I haven't even accepted yet and I'm already a captain of that order." Naruto flashed a completely shameless grin directed at the man in front of him. Until now, he hadn't been informed that he would be Figolian's replacement in his own order, with his own subordinates. "I understand if you reject this. But all I could think of was you as captain of the Crimson Lion. I'm sorry." "Just me?" Naruto blew on his pinky finger, clearing the earwax that was clogging his own ear. "There are more capable people, like Nozzle Silva. That braided guy wouldn't hesitate to take command of 2 orders under his command. According to the rules, no captain can have 2 officers at the same time. That would create an imbalance that the other captains might resent. I can't give one captain more power than another. It could cause an internal war and, right now, we can't deal with an internal conflict." The Eye of the Midnight Sun was the Wizard King's primary target. He couldn't allow a war between orders to start because he had given more power to one of the captains, placing him above the rest. And although he trusted Nozzle Silva's skills and mind, he couldn't give him the order that was being commanded by his rival, even though he knew Nozzle appreciated Figolian. And as for Mereoleona, Julius had other plans to utilize the woman's abilities. Because of this and a few knights with the skills and experience, the Wizard King opted to give a chance to someone who truly wouldn't disappoint him. "I've looked at all the possibilities, all the cards before taking you, Naruto." He wasn't lying. He'd spent hours examining the different possibilities, the different cards in his deck, before using Naruto's to take the position of captain of an order. Because while it brought him benefits, it also caused him problems. "I'd say you're lying to me, but I've rarely caught you lying." A clip closed the Aquamarine Stag's vice captain's words. Gently, the young man placed his old robes on the table, keeping the clasp in his left hand. "I'll have to overload myself with a little extra work." As if the third eye hadn't been a pain in the ass. There were still magic stones that the Eye of the Midnight Sun needed to complete his plan. This was the main reason Julius decided to promote Naruto. Placing him as captain would make the enemies understand how difficult it would be for them to defeat him in open battle. The third eye should be in charge of the Eye of Midnight Sun for a while. Vermilion replaced cyan on the robes. The stag's crest changed to a lion. "I could say I have the situation completely under control. However, you're sending the black bulls, aren't you?" The cloak billowed slightly in the wind, swaying behind its wearer. "I'd say I saw it in your expression, in the gleam in your eyes, but I'd be completely lying. Lol." Naruto understood Julius's urgency to have all the Magic Knight orders fully active. He had seen the hidden blades in the former Purple Orca captain's room, and everything pointed to an imminent diamond raid on them. "Naruto. I was raised in war, Wizard King. That warm-tempered tone faded. My people raised me, as if I were a weapon. As if every child were a weapon. There were no real feelings of love or brotherhood behind my master's teachings. That phrase I said to the trader. It has no real meaning in my home. I can sense what is coming, and I can know what you need, Wizard King. As a knight, I am completely at your service. But as a free man, I can make my own decisions about any option, about any situation. War was normal for him. Surrounded by corpses, by wounded comrades. The children were mere cannon fodder, shields that the adults used when it suited them. Will of fire. That phrase that marked the loyalty of generations was also the one that ended up extinguishing the fire that the blade carried like a torch. Ever since I became part of the Clover Kingdom, I've made it my mission to do nothing I don't want to do. The blonde's golden hair swayed as he began to scratch the back of his neck. However, I can't leave a comrade at the mercy of enemies. Naruto. As Randall said, you can force us to follow this line you've drawn, Julius, and we will have to obey. But this is not the time to be irresponsible. The Wizard King's eyes widened slightly. Placing his right arm over his chest with 3 fingers extended, Naruto formed the kingdom salute. I will be the captain of the Crimson Lion, and I will prevent any enemy from achieving their goal and harming our people. It is a promise I intend to keep. Chapter 6. The Crimson Lion had been led by the Vermilion family since its founding as an order of magic knights. With the lion as its symbol and crimson as its distinctive color, the Order of the Lions had remained the second or first of the 9 orders serving the Wizard King in the Clover Kingdom, always brimming with confidence in their captain. But currently, that confidence had completely vanished. After the incident at the royal capital, Fugolian Vermilion was critically injured and left bedridden in an induced coma, forcing the vice-captain of the order to keep it active, something that caused more problems than it solved. Without a captain its members could trust, the Order of the Crimson Lion fell into a constant slump that slightly affected the morale of the magic knights belonging to this order. Because of this, the Wizard King decided, as a last resort, to place another knight as temporary leader of the order until a contingency plan could be established against the Eye of Midnight Sun, a group that had been wreaking havoc within the Clover Kingdom and had the orders moving from one place to another. For the position of captain of the order, the Wizard King came up with 2 completely valid options. One was Fugolian's older sister, a truly powerful woman with powers likely superior to her brother's. The other was a young adult with undeniable power and abilities, but who lacked a relationship with Fugolian or the members of his order, creating a clear gap between the Crimson Lion members and the young man Julius was considering appointing as temporary leader. Ultimately, the Wizard King opted to completely change traditions. He discarded Leona Vermilion, the obvious choice, and decided to appoint Naruto Uzumaki, the least popular option and the one that could cause the most problems in the short term. However, Julius had opted for this option because he didn't have time to reorganize the order. Leona was far from the capital and the affairs of the Magic Knights, which made it difficult for him to find the woman in time, even as Wizard King. Naruto was much closer, more receptive to following the Wizard King's orders, and this was something Julius knew perfectly well. He had raised the boy as his unofficial pupil, training him to become, in the future, an orderly leader or even the next Wizard King in command of the Clover Magic Knights. It was the perfect opportunity for Naruto to be tested as an order leader, to see his leadership skills and how he moved his subordinates through the situations every order captain must face. That didn't mean Naruto had to sit back and do nothing. As captain of the Crimson Lion, the young man had to follow the guidelines, training, and behaviors of any order captain, something people like Yami didn't fully understand. Julius longed to see how his pupil would perform in an order filled with nobles, how he would lead them to victory, and how he would deal with the bitter taste of defeat or even the loss of some companions. Frustration, despair, anger, sadness. Every captain had been immersed in different emotions, both during their time as a member of the order and when they were appointed captain, which shaped each squad leader's personality. It was something everyone could see. Each captain was different, behaving completely differently from their colleagues, but they all loved and protected their subordinates, following their own guidelines for behavior. Fugolian was a man made to lead, a true commander on and off the battlefield. He wasn't just the members of his order who respected him. Even the members of the Silver Eagles showed a slight respect for the man, with Nozzle, the captain, showing it the most with his actions, considering the fire user his rival to defeat. The bar was set high for whoever was chosen to replace the Crimson Lion's former captain. Fugolian would not be an easy man to replace, a name easily erased by actions he had already taken. Someone might try to overshadow the man, but few could actually succeed, and those who did would be considered almost fit to be the next Clover Wizard King. Results, recognition, and power. To become the next Wizard King to command the Magic Knights of the Clover Kingdom, 3 simple conditions had to be met, elevating the selected person to the highest position within the Magic Knights, a position that would give them control of the army. But even though these conditions were simple, they were difficult to fulfill unless you were a noble. Any commoner who tried to rise to become Wizard King would find too many obstacles in their way. Knowing the problems that could arise, Julius had decided to place the Order of the Crimson Lion under the command of the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer, both to provide him with experience as a leader and to gain a better reputation among his fellow officers and civilians. Captains drew attention to themselves, were the absolute focus of any judgment directed at their subordinates, and were the first to be blamed if the order didn't perform as well as it should, if they weren't good magic knights. Yami Sukahiro was an example of a captain marked by dishonor. The Black Bulls had failed to excel and had accumulated black stars over the previous year, finishing last at the Star Festival and being dismissed as mere barbarians, the worst knights in the kingdom's service. Those prejudices about Yami were the same ones that could be turned against Naruto. Was he a good or bad captain? Julius hoped his precious pupil could learn and evolve more than he had. His performance against the Eye of the Midnight Sun had marked a first step on his path, but few knights had seen that or knew the boy well enough to know what he was really like. He needed the recognition of other knights, and Fugolian's order was the perfect opportunity for that, to show what he was made of as a magic knight in service to the kingdom. The situation was on the brink. The diamond was moving across the border, and the Eye of Midnight Sun was searching for some magic stones to complete a plan whose purpose was completely unknown. And to this, the wise man had to add the strange movements of an armed group that had recently appeared, drenching the cities they passed through with the blood of people, of knights. The Wizard King massaged the bridge of his nose. As the most powerful wizard, he could eliminate any direct threat to the kingdom, but as Wizard King, he had to stay within the royal capital as much as possible. He had to delegate important missions to the various captains and orders, hoping they would complete the mission without any casualties or extreme difficulty, something that had been becoming more complicated lately. Wise man. The assistant appeared in the three wise men's office, showing a worried face. Tell me, Marks. Is this something about the mission given to the Black Bulls? The magic stones were a problem they couldn't put off until another time. Due to the urgency and the case of treason within the Knights, the Wizard King assigned Yami, the captain of the Black Bulls, to obtain one of the stones, all with the goal of preventing the Eye of the Midnight Sun from obtaining information on the location of said magical object. No. It's about a report from a group of Crimson Lion Knights. Before assigning Naruto as captain of the Fugolian Order, the Wizard King assigned some missions directly to the group as he had done with the Black Bulls. What is the report? Julius studied his assistant's face. Signs of concern and anguish were evident on Marx's face, through the wrinkles and the drop of sweat that trickled down his temple to his chin. There are several dead and wounded. A fight between the remaining members and an outsider is taking place in the Forgotten Region, right on the border with the Diamond. The Wizard King's eyes widened slightly. A direct confrontation on the border with the Diamond Kingdom would attract the attention of the members of the Magic Warriors serving his rival kingdom, something Julius wanted to avoid as much as possible. Dead in touch with Naruto. It's better if. I've already done it, wise man. Like Julius, Marx had belonged to the old order of the Ash Deer, as the Aquamarine Deer were formerly known. We've been working for years, wise man. The sigh escaped Julius's mouth. It's the perfect time for you to show your subordinates who you are, Naruto. You must shine now. Forgotten Region. Conflict Zone. The Clover Kingdom was divided into three regions. The Noble Region, the Common Region, and the Forgotten Region. The latter region was home to people with almost no magical power, capable only of performing ordinary tasks, and unable to aspire to a position within a knightly order. They were, to put it mildly, the forgotten people of the Clover Kingdom. The Forgotten Region surrounded the Common Region like an outer layer, serving as the border with the kingdoms neighboring the Clover, and was considered the frontier and the place where knights were deployed to fight against the kingdom's various invaders. It was also the region where dungeons appeared most regularly, being the clear target of either the Diamond or the Spade, the two enemy kingdoms of the Clover. Currently, due to the Diamond's movements, the Wizard King had deployed a necessary number of knights along the border, in hopes of mitigating invasion attempts. It was a containment measure to prevent the Diamond from becoming a real problem until they completely got rid of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, a group that was currently high on the kingdom's list of enemies and whom Julius had prioritized. But making the Eye of Midnight Sun a priority didn't prevent enemies from attempting to invade. Causing direct confrontations with the Diamond border would only bring pressing problems that the Wizard King had to avoid as much as possible, containing them if necessary. Asp. Leopold Vermilion, younger brother of Mirieleona Vermilion and Fugolian Vermilion, sworn rival of Asta of the Black Bulls, and the future captain of the Crimson Lions, with the clear goal of surpassing his older brother. The young magic knight was deployed to the Forgotten Region following the direct orders that the Wizard King handed over to the vice captain of the order, a mission that should have been easy to execute, but that became extremely complicated when they found the target. "I don't like being kept waiting, nor do I like keeping people waiting," he said, hunched over, an appendage sticking out from under a dark robe, his face hidden by a straw hat. The enemy who had wounded and killed several magic knights now stood before Leopold Vermilion, unfazed by his adversary's fire magic. "My new companion will die too young." Fire magic. The orange glow accompanied the cry of an exhausted Leopold Vermilion. "Fire spiral. I could say that fire is my weakness, but that would be wrong." The tail flicked and dug into the ground. "This body isn't one that can be harmed." Debris scattered across the area as the young Vermilion's spell struck the chunk of ground the enemy had lifted using his appendage. "No. Art is an eternal beauty," faint blue threads appeared. "Flesh is something that can rot." The man moved his hands, and his tail twitched at its owner's command. Small pieces of rock moved toward Leopold, being pushed and pulled by these blue threads, forcing the young wizard to cover himself with his arms. "And you can't get distracted, kid." Leopold opened his eyes. The sound of flesh being ripped accompanied the agonized scream of the youngest Vermilion. The hunchbacked man's tail pierced the boy's stomach, emerging from the other side like a sword. Anyone would have thought he would strike like a scorpion, but the man pierced the boy without hesitation. "It's time I met up with that boy. Dying young must be worrying." His legs gave way. Leopold fell to his knees, feeling his body burn, his mouth go dry. "Is this all I have to do? Is this what I can achieve, what allows me to keep my promise?" Frustration filled Leopold's mind to the point of collapse. The young knight lay on the cold grass, feeling the dampness of the morning dew, watching the thin rays of sunlight appear over the horizon. This was his first defeat, his first failed mission, and his possible death before fulfilling the promise he made when he made the mark on his forehead, a promise that was slipping through his fingers like raindrops. He couldn't even consider himself Esta's rival. "No, I'm not going to be left stranded." The young man clenched both hands. Gritting his teeth, Leopold slowly stood up, shifting his weight onto his lower body, ignoring the pool of blood that was forming at his feet. "Are you back on your feet? I don't know if it's from clapping or if you're just an overly extreme idiot." The tail mechanism activated. The extra limb moved toward the Magic Knight, trying to impale him directly through the head. "I'm going to end this, Magic Knight." His knees reacted, allowing Leopold to flex his legs. The boy's eyes remained focused. His mind, his senses, were focused on his opponent's attack. The red-orange glow engulfed half of her face. Fire magic. Each page of the mage's grimoire contained a spell. There were blank pages, ready for new spells to appear upon them when their bearers had grown as wizards and sorcerers. Great fire spiral. Leopold Vermilion was slightly proud. He was proud of his brother Figolian, the man who raised him, trained him, and groomed him to be a magic knight in the service of the Wizard King. It was his brother who told him what the mark on his forehead was for. The memory of a promise of Vermilion couldn't break, of a dream he must achieve. Beneath a straw hat, the attacker's eyes opened slightly. The burning wood generated an ashy smell, and various splinters flew out as his tail was shattered by the spell, a spell that was a spiraling tide of fire advancing toward him. "I'm not going to die here." Leopold was prepared to finish off the man in front of him. Several of his companions were wounded, nearly dead. Burning to death isn't beautiful, but it can be considered something completely eternal. A crackle and a light cloud of dust escaped from the dark robe. "You're not going to kill me." The tidal wave of fire completely engulfed the enemy. The smell of ash and burnt wood accompanied the trail the spell left across the conflict zone. A complete line as black as night itself, advancing directly toward where the attacker's body should have been. But when the smoke cleared several seconds later, only charred splinters remained, straw completely turned to ash, and a few small threads of cloth that must have belonged to the renegade's dark tunic. Mages don't have an assassin's consciousness. That's what I learned from our encounter. Leopold turned his head. On one of the thick branches of a tree above him stood a young man with red hair, ash-brown eyes, and very pale skin that could be seen on his face, a teenage face. "Acting like a ninja gives me an advantage over us, boy." Leopold's eyes opened. Behind the redeed in the black robe, the young wizard saw hundreds of puppets hovering above the area. He immediately deduced they were puppets. They didn't move. They were suspended, watching, waiting. "If I were a knight like you, this would be considered puppet magic, but I'm not a wizard, a sorcerer, or a magic knight." A faint hiss reached the eardrums of the youngest Vermilion. "I use puppets. I feed them. It's not magic, but it helps me kill you." Those puppets didn't react for several seconds. When one of the renegade's fingers moved, the dark cloud of wooden figures controlled by someone else moved toward its target. "I can't move. I thought I'd killed him, but it seems I've eliminated another one of those puppets. I don't even have any mana left. How am I going to survive now? How am I going to save the rest of my companions?" Magic was known throughout the world. Magic knights, as well as magic warriors, were the soldiers of their respective kingdoms, ready to follow the orders of their kings. Because of that, Leopold couldn't see how the man was moving the puppets, how he was using them to attack him without being overwhelmed by the use of so many. He was similar to Raid Spirito, the perpetrator of the attack on the royal capital. But the young man only saw the similarity in their techniques because that puppeteer was several steps above the member of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. You shouldn't get distracted, boy. The first of the puppets appeared in front of the Magic Knight. The Crimson Lion member reacted too late, being struck by it and sent back to the ground, rolling in the grass until he was able to get up. Better reflexes. The second puppet appeared behind the boy. Clasping both hands together, it delivered a hammer blow that sent Leopold crashing to the ground, his face covered in dirt and grass. More attention to the environment. The third one emerged from the ground. It smashed through the ground right where Leopold was lying, grabbing the boy by his waist until he flew through the air, crashing into a huge pine tree. Oh. I could make a huge list of the mistakes you've made that led to your death. Leopold fell heavily to the ground, spitting blood, his body feeling heavy. Allowing my puppets to hit you has allowed my poison to enter your bloodstream. The spasm, the taste of blood flooding the mouth, the lack of oxygen. NGH. Fighting using only my puppet army isn't perfect. I must eliminate my enemies. That's why all my puppets have poison, a poison that's now coursing through your system, infecting everything. I'd say that in 5 minutes you'll meet the god of death if one exists in this universe. If not, you'll just remain dead, being devoured by worms until nothing remains but bones. There were hundreds of poisons in the world, ranging from the most insignificant to the most deadly. In some cases, these poisons left lasting effects on the people they infected, effects that persisted even when healing magic was used on the poisoned individuals. Leaving you to die isn't a very nice thing to do. I'll end your life and find that idiot. The leaves of the trees began to sway. At first, they did so gently and controlledly, as if they were being rocked by the loving arms of a mother. But seconds later, they swayed wildly, as if thousands of people were moving through the city to different parts of it. The three puppets exploded into thousands of pieces that scattered across the battle zone, disappearing into the grass and ashes, stained with blood and dirt. Several of my subordinates couldn't be rescued. Leopold was gently lifted by the person who had just arrived. A bluish liquid was poured into the young knight's mouth, and within seconds, his spasms stopped and he began to breathe normally, more controlled. It's fortunate that you know the effects of some poisons. Surprising knowledge, I might say. Magic knights rely too heavily on magic. But you seem entirely different. Through two slits, the renegade's eyes glanced at the crimson cloak fluttering from the intruder's shoulders. Another crimson lion, from what I see. I'm your captain. 6 puppets moved toward the new magic knight commanding the crimson lions. He flexed his legs and drew his katana in a fluid motion. A cloud of splinters appeared between him and the renegade. You're different. Even without your eyes, you've been able to perceive the movement of my puppets. Are you some kind of sensor? We could talk and I could explain the reasons for my blindness. Naruto lightly touched the blindfold covering his eyes, but that's not exactly why I'm here. Marx had informed him before the wise man. He had only accepted the position of captain a couple of days earlier, and now he was embroiled in a very fragile situation. I'll have to deal with you, captain of the Crimson Lion of the Clover Kingdom. The cloak fluttered. Thanks to the light of dawn, Naruto visualized the red clouds in it. But I will introduce myself to you, so that some light may shed on your mind. I am Sasori of the Red Sand, a member of Akatsuki. The Uzumaki's lips curved into a smile. Well, Sasori of Akatsuki. Let's see if art really is eternal. Chapter 7. The Clover Kingdom is known for being the place where the first wise man confronted the demon who could have ended humanity's existence. Hage is where the skeleton of the demon who ravaged the kingdom rests, beneath a small statue representing the wise man who single-handedly defeated it. According to legend, the first wise man possessed a 4-leaf grimoire representing good fortune. When a young man is chosen by a grimoire with this number of leaves, he is considered a representation of the legend, an incarnation of the first wise man. That is what is said in the Clover Kingdom. However, there is a 5th page, the one where the demons hide, the one that symbolizes the demon of a generation. But for a grimoire to appear with this odd number of pages is strange, and throughout the 500 years since the first wise man until the present day, no young person has appeared who possessed such a grimoire, since demons and elves are merely beings that grandmothers tell their grandchildren about to force them to go to sleep early. But grimoires with odd numbers of pages, whether 4 or 5, are sold on the black market for a very good price. Many groups of renegade magicians are tasked with finding these strange objects and delivering them to their contacts for a good sum of money, so it was not surprising that the Magic Knights were forced to face groups of poorly trained bandits. The Eye of the Midnight Sun had been a terrorist group too direct in its targeting, and the red-clouded puppeteer didn't fall into the category of a relic thief or a simple untrained bandit. Just a glance was enough to understand that Sasori of the Red Sand was a seasoned assassin, a mercenary working for the highest bidder, or someone pursuing something truly valuable. Throughout the history of the Clover Kingdom and the reigns of the various wise men, the occasions in which two groups of mercenaries or terrorists appeared simultaneously were rare and all too rare. It was as if something were about to happen, as if something were moving behind the scenes. Yupa. Naruto dodged another puppet. The young captain jumped back, dodging several stingers that could have penetrated his body and injected a considerable amount of lethal poison. Those combat methods weren't those of magicians. The closest thing Naruto saw on that continent was the Diamond Kingdom's assassins, those who cleansed the kingdom of traitors and enemies of the crown, or who obtained the desired information for its ruler. That red-haired man moving hundreds of puppets wasn't a magician, at least not an ordinary one. That almost gave me that. He placed both hands around the katana's handle. He felt the leather yield, adapting to his fingers, to the palm of his right hand, and how it didn't resist the pressure he began to apply to the sheath. On the contrary, it molded completely to the shape of his hand until it was perfect. The downward slash sent a powerful wave of wind whipping through the tree branches. Splinters flew before Sasori's brown eyes as he watched his puppets being ripped to shreds by his opponent's sheer brute force. Wow. This deserves a good ramen, don't you think? Naruto flashed a brilliant smile, which he aimed directly at Sasori. In response, the mercenary flicked his two-limbed fingers and sent more puppets hurtling toward his opponent. I'm not going to share the food with you. Sasori raised his right hand slightly and ordered the puppets to fan out in a perfect circle around the captain and his subordinate. He intended to attack both mages and leave them there, dying completely from the pain of the poison. Really? The captain's face went from amused and cheerful to confused. You don't want ramen? Look, it's really good, huh? The night sky turned dark. Naruto raised his head. Drawing on the Kai and mana surrounding him, he sensed danger, like a scream urging him to move. Above him, like a tidal wave, at least 100 puppets were falling directly into a perfect formation from which he couldn't escape. Solo Morid. So you surrounded us so we couldn't escape. Naruto twisted his body to the right, swinging the katana in the same direction. Slowly, a layer of wind began to compress around the blade. That's very clever, you know. Don't try to use the entire arsenal in one overwhelming movement, idiot. Wind magic. The metal of the blade vanished completely. Wind cloak. The wind compressed so much that it turned completely white. Snow curtain. Wind cloak allowed him to compress the wind around his sword like a perfect cover, something he learned by watching the Black Bull's captain fight, a man who combined his skills with the sword of magic. That weak spell isn't going to. It wasn't an overwhelming attack like the ones he'd used against the third eye of the Eye of Midnight Sun, nor as forceful as he would have been when facing just one of those terrorists. Snow curtain was the perfect spell to penetrate a defense, to cut straight through a person's skin, muscle, and bone to the heart. Unless the puppets had been reinforced with dense mana-like vetos, they would be completely shattered until nothing remained but sawdust. You were saying? Sasori had arranged some sturdy puppets to launch at both mages. At the same time, the puppets surrounding them would pounce on both of them and crush them to death. But his plans changed course when he saw that enormous mass of puppets completely shattered by a slash of air, by a movement that was too simple. Mages didn't act to kill if they could avoid it. In his confrontation with the third eye, Naruto overrode this rule, following the training he'd received as a child in his village from his instructors. But he did so because he knew those men survived, that he would see them again sometime, and because he knew who they were, though not their full history. But Sasori was a complete mystery to him. He knew he belonged to a group, but not which one, how many members it had, or what they were up to. The Eye of the Midnight Sun was after some relics, but what about the puppeteer? Julius was the one leading the defense of the Clover Kingdom, the one who rescued it from certain death and being completely alone in the world. Naruto couldn't let Sasori die or escape without knowing what he was chasing, both because he was in the Forgotten Region and because he interfered with the Crimson Lion's mission. As captain, he had to obtain all the information to protect the kingdom and bring justice to his injured comrades. You tense your muscles perfectly. You move your feet with coordination. I've hunted some mages, but you're different from them, as if you're not a mage, even though you fight like them. Sasori had studied Naruto during the first few minutes of the fight. As a mercenary, he had fought magic knights before. But none had ever used a sword or moved so well around the battlefield. The boy in front of him seemed accustomed to fighting hand to hand, with pure physical power and no magic behind it, which intrigued him. Thank you. That's quite a compliment. The captain of the Crimson Lions blushed with embarrassment, stroking the back of his neck with his left hand, as if he were a completely shy person who had never received a compliment in his entire life. I wasn't. Astride. Sasori opened his eyes wide. Sending energy into his legs, the puppeteer jumped, evading the completely vertical slash that would have cut him in two. While in the air, he felt the resulting wind hit his face, causing a slight cut. It's like he's reading my movements, like he's reading my mind. He acts when I act, and he moves when I do. Is this guy really blind behind the blindfold? Sasori of the Sand doubted the young captain was completely blind. The young man moved gracefully through the area, almost as if he were dancing, like a gazelle evading the claws of the tiger chasing it across the prairie. How could a blind person do that? What was he hiding behind the blindfold? Did I fail? As it swung down, the sword had cut a slash into the thick branch where its owner was resting and where the Akatsuki member had once been. When Naruto tried to pull at it to move, he couldn't get the blade out of place. Oh? It's my chance. The puppeteer landed on a branch several feet away from his opponent. He crossed his arms over his torso. He moved his fingers as if strumming a harp and relaxed his arms to allow the movement to be much more fluid. Broken branches, swirling leaves. The puppets appeared above Naruto, snapping some of the tree branches, revealing stingers filled with a thick purple liquid, the scent of which filled the blonde's nostrils. Ugh. He relaxed his arms, let the tension escape from his legs, and braced his hips. Trusting his still functioning senses, Naruto moved to evade each of Sasori's puppets without receiving a single scratch from their stingers. Wind magic above them, with a blue sphere, Naruto prepared to destroy them once and for all. Rasengan. He thrust his arm toward the nearest puppet. The blue dome soon formed, completely engulfing the puppet and its nearest companions, turning the splinters into nothing but dust. Rasengan was a destructive move, one that relied entirely on the mana the user put into it. The more mana Naruto used, the more devastating the move would be, and the closer his opponent would be to death, as the Rasengan didn't just damage externally, but also at a completely cellular level, making it dangerous to anyone who took a direct hit. Beto, thanks to his dense mana, resilience, and healing, was one of the few who could withstand it and survive the conflict. He's a monster. Sasori sensed the density of his opponent's mana. An image of an enormous fox appeared before him, its jaws open and ready to bite him in two. That image only lasted for a second, though. Regaining his sanity, Sasori of the Red Sand moved the rest of his puppets in an attempt to prevent his opponent from taking the sword. Almost. No. Almost. Cold. Right, left, up, down, and right again, left, now down, then up. Sasori moved the puppets in an attempt to catch Naruto, but the young knight evaded each one by moving through the combat zone between the tree branches, as if using light magic, exceeding the speed of his eyes. Shit, the outburst escaped the Akatsuki member's mouth without him really meaning to say it. You're too annoying, kid. Just get caught already. Okay. Naruto fell onto the branch, his arms dangling in front of him, completely dead. He was hunched forward slightly, his head pointed in Sasori's direction, as if he were staring at him from behind the bandage. The puppets didn't stop their movements, and Sasori did nothing to stop them. For whatever reason, the magician had stopped moving and was now standing still, motionless, with the grimoire floating to his right, fully open. It was his chance. Wind creation magic. The pages turned slowly until they stopped on a page and began to shine whitishly. Chaotic wind dragon. Yellow eyes appeared behind Naruto. The air began to swirl behind the boy, forming an immense dragon with a hurricane force wind that tore through puppets and trees alike, its jaws gaping open, inviting entry. I'm just going to stand still while Draji does everything. There was no verbal command. Naruto swung his arm, pointing his finger directly at Sasori, and the dragon charged at him, destroying everything in its path, destroying trees like a hurricane, tearing apart puppets like a real beast. How much power does that move have? Sasori held onto the branch with a hook that appeared from his own body. Using his torso and legs to force himself forward, the Akatsuki member managed to move a few inches, despite his eyes being closed by the wind. But it was too late. The dragon wrapped its jaws of wind around him and continued on its path until it exploded into a fierce wind as it crashed 200 meters away, creating a deep crater. From his position on a branch completely removed from the impact zone, Naruto released all the air he'd been holding while invoking the spell. That wind magic generated an immense dragon, summoning all the surrounding air, taking away all the oxygen a person could ingest. This had caused Sasori to move incorrectly and received the entire attack directly, being enveloped in the conjured wind. Naruto was a sword user. He preferred to fight with his katana, summoning the air around the blade of his weapon. His body reacted to these movements in the Yami style. He had been trained since childhood to wield a weapon, and now he continued to use it, despite being able to cast spells unrelated to his sword. But these were repertoire he preferred to keep as an ace up his sleeve, as a surprise for the enemy, as he had done with Sasori. I think I broke it. Using his hand as a shield, Naruto looked in the direction Sasori's body had crashed. The hurricane force wind that formed the dragon would have likely ripped it apart, leaving nothing or just small pieces of wood. Naruto had understood that Sasori's body was a puppet, that he himself had been transformed into one of his precious tools that he called art. I can end this confrontation. He withdrew his sword from the branch and sheathed it, causing a click as the guard hit the metal lining the entrance to his scabbard. I must check on the boy. Leopold lay on the ground, his face turned toward the stars. But he wasn't alone. Creating a huge vegetation field surrounding all the wounded, an orange-haired girl stood next to the young Vermilion, her face worried. "How are you, Mimosa?" Mimosa Vermilion, a user of plant magic, primarily used it as a support for her teammates. The young mage belonged to the Golden Dawn as a grade 3 inferior magic knight, placing her below her superior, Klaus Linetz, who was the team leader. "He'll recover, Klaus-san." The Golden Dawn youth team had become aware of the confrontation after returning from a difficult mission assigned by Captain Vengeance, the Golden Dawn leader. As magic knights, they couldn't allow their comrades to be injured or killed, or at least that's what Klaus learned from a confrontation with the Black Bulls. Ara, two grimoires rose. Klaus's turned silver, while the young man beside him's turned a glowing green. Members of the Golden Dawn. The young men's posture relaxed when they saw who was standing in front of them. All three had been present at the award ceremony and the banquet, witnessing the confrontation between the Silver Eagles and the young man who had stopped a few feet away from them, scratching the back of his neck and displaying a goofy smile. Naruto-san. Klaus adjusted his glasses on his face. Why is the vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer wearing the Crimson Lion's cape? Klaus had been observant. The first detail he noticed about Naruto was the change of cloak, something that didn't usually happen unless the knight had been transferred to another order, something that didn't happen very often either. The Uzumaki lifted the reddish cloak. "The Wizard King granted me command of the Crimson Lions, while Captain Figolian recovers." The blonde's attention fell on Leopold. "How are my companions?" Being blind from birth had endowed Naruto with abilities other knights couldn't possess without hard training and without shedding any sweat. Because of his inability to see, he had generated another way of seeing the world on his own. This was through the flow of mana and chakra in each person or place. Guided by these and combining his Kai, in addition to proper physical training, he could fight and live like a normal person. He had a sensor that allowed him to see people in their mana form, which were basically huge blue figures walking around him. But this didn't happen with Asta, the mana-less boy. Thanks to that, Naruto could check the status of his companions thanks to their mana pulses, which acted like heartbeats and indicated how they were doing if they needed help immediately. They're being healed with my plant magic, though I'm only giving first aid. Because of the poison, they should be treated in the capital. Too bad. We need a mage with spatial magic, Naruto sighed, understanding the importance of moving the injured members out of the conflict zone. Though we can use something to move them better without a spatial mage. I think if we combine. The cracking sound alerted the four knights. Three of them reacted a millisecond later, while the fourth drew his sword and cut the attacking puppet in two. Did you think that attack would kill me? There was no trace of the red cloud layer. Pieces of wood were torn from the body and scratches were present on his face. Such a thing will not happen, magician. The spider began to crawl up the katana's blade and onto its handle. It was white, made of clay, and had small red eyes that stared at Naruto. Katsu? That spider sank slightly and shortly afterward exploded, sending a flash directly into the captain's face, enveloping him in smoke and fire. You're finally here, Madara. Flying high in the night sky, a huge white bird appeared before the Golden Dawn members. Atop it, a young man with blonde hair appeared, sticking out his tongue. I saved you? You should thank me. Sasori and Madara were the youngest couple in the group known as Akatsuki. Both considered themselves, in their own right, artists. One used his puppets created from corpses as his art for the world, while the other used clay as his own. But they both had different visions of what was considered true art. While Sasori preferred an art tied to the eternal, Madara preferred a more ephemeral vision, like that of a real explosion. A projectile shot out from the cloud of smoke. In a split second, the bird carrying the clay user was completely impaled, forcing its summoner to fall directly to the ground, next to his companion. An explosion in the sky lit up that clearing. I hadn't finished paying for that sword. Small scratches on his clothing, small abrasions on the right side of his face, and the bandage fabric slightly burned. Naruto didn't suffer too much from the explosion and was seen emerging from the enveloping cloud on his own two legs. The guy survived. Order captains had to endure long battles on the front lines during a war. An explosion of that magnitude was a direct insult to Naruto's growing pride as a captain. I'm really pissed off, a puppet popped out from behind Naruto, from the ground. You broke my sword, woman. Madara's right eyebrow twitched as he was mistaken for a woman. And I want my money back. Spinning around, the captain broke the puppet's head with a completely horizontal kick, forcing Sasori to withdraw it. I'm not a woman. No. Your voice is too soft. Naruto planted his feet on the ground. Lightly, the cloak began to billow behind him like a real cape. But it doesn't matter. I'm coming for you too, artists. Before moving, Naruto reacted to the iron wall that appeared in front of him. A wall that shattered in the face of the explosion of a dozen clay ants. Sorry to intrude, Captain. Yeah, Naruto's lips curled. Golden Dawn isn't that self-centered. Both Akatsuki jumped and evaded both drills that came towards them, summoned by Klaus. Let me be your support. The Magic Knight's missions were rarely carried out by a single mage. Such cases were reserved for veteran members, the strongest, or the captains and vice-captains, leaving the rookies to form teams of 3, always led by a more advanced member. Naruto analyzed Klaus's request. He had studied the magic of every member of each of the orders, at the request of the Wizard King, which was helpful for analyzing them. Klaus, a 3-year member of the Golden Dawn, was a user of steel magic, making him an excellent fighter and defender, something he could use to protect Mimosa, the healer, from those two, which took a weight off his shoulders. Great. Klaus-kun, you'll be the one in charge of protecting our healer mage. Pieces of the iron wall were slowly falling away, revealing Madara and Sasori. And you'll be the one on the offensive. The fierce wind blew past Naruto directly toward the Akatsuki. A massive eagle struck the two mercenaries, knocking them back several meters. Of the 3 members of that group of Magic Knights of the Golden Dawn, only one stood out for his immense mana and his ability to comprehend it as if connected to it. Naruto understood this the first time they crossed paths during the banquet and had flipped the coin as a direct bet, correctly predicting his own prediction. You know Dehage, the first rookie commoner to be acknowledged by William Vengeance, one of the finest captains in the Clover Kingdom service and one of the best commanders Naruto knew. That boy from the Forgotten Region, that commoner, had a growth rate superior to many rookies, almost as if mana had blessed him. I'd say this is complicated, Sasori. Madara flashed the cocky grin that characterized his age. He was the youngest member of Akatsuki, the largest criminal organization in his homeland. He wasn't the type to be overwhelmed by a slap on the cheek. It'll be difficult for you, a click accompanied the puppeteer's words. From Sasori's hands, sharp blades emerged, ready to slice through his enemy's flesh. We have the information. We just need to throw these guys off their scent. That means cooperation. Madara's cloak fell to the ground. 2 mouths appeared on the palms of his hands, giving him a grotesque appearance. So, partners, stood next to Naruto, are we having a duo showdown? Heh. Whoever loses gets to buy the other ramen. Akatsuki had to return to their base, and the Magic Knights had to prevent it. Chapter 8. Age was always a town forgotten by the nobles. Located in the Forgotten Region, few of its inhabitants were able to achieve their cherished dream of becoming a Magic Knight. As in the rest of the towns in that region, people were born with little or no magical power, so every time someone was born with overwhelming power, it was cause for celebration. And Hage was no exception. 2 of its young inhabitants, with the ambitious dream of becoming a wizard king, managed to take up the mantle of an order of Magic Knights and defend the kingdom from enemies who decided to attack it. One of those boys had no magical power. He couldn't harness the mana of his companions or adversaries. The other, on the other hand, was a genius, a boy born under the star of good fortune, and his life seemed to be linked to mana, as if God himself had linked his life to the power that coursed through the earth, giving life to everything in that vast world. These 2 young men obtained their grimoires at the same time. These 2 young men joined an order at the same time. These 2 young men, they were rivals and brothers at the same time. Neither of them knew their parents and were cared for by Hage's father, the caretaker of the village's orphaned youth, something he and his sister did with all the love in the world, just as these boys gave them money to support themselves. Both young men represented 2 sides of the same coin. One shone brightly, transforming his shadow into the darkness that enveloped the other, making him better, helping him grow in the eyes of those who were judging them, knowing where they came from, who they were. Being a commoner in an order of knights was extremely complicated, and few managed to stand out among all the nobles in service to the wise king. And, like 2 sides of the same coin, the Hage boys went to completely opposite orders of magical knights. The boy with the overwhelming power was taken under the wing of the Golden Dawn, while the young man with no magical power was taken in by the Black Bulls, the worst order of knights in the kingdom's service. Contempt, mockery, anger. When the young man with overwhelming power ended up inside the Golden Dawn and was praised by its captain, many of its members looked on with contempt, resentment and disgust, feeling that a commoner was among them, sharing their bread, sharing their roof. Silver Eagles, Crimson Lions, and the Golden Dawn. 3 of the most powerful orders had a total of 90% of their members being nobles. The first 2 were led by royalty, the Vermilion and the Silva. The third was so renowned and prestigious that its captain rarely allowed a commoner to join its ranks. But that commoner from Hage was no ordinary person. He was chosen by the four-leaf clover, by a grimoire that only the first wizard king had carried 500 years ago, when elves and demons still existed on Earth. A shiny 4-page grimoire. Another dark, tattered, and dull grimoire, wrapped in a completely opaque and strange color. Both young men once again represented the opposite poles of the same line, two sides of the same coin. They came from the same town, the same social stratum, but they were completely different, totally opposite to each other. Yuno and Asta grew up following a promise, a dream too big for those without the ambition or mental fortitude to overcome the thick, high walls that awaited them. While Asta faced the eye of the midnight sun, Yuno did the same with the mercenary before him. The captain of the Crimson Lions had given the appropriate orders. Taking advantage of his time as vice captain, Naruto decided to deploy the members of Golden Dawn in a manner that was entirely efficient, according to his own mind. Klaus, the steel magic user, would protect Mimosa from any attacks from the Akatsuki members, allowing the girl to heal the rest of the wounded scattered around the battlefield. By leaving the only person who could heal them protected, Naruto had less to worry about and could get down to finishing the job once and for all. But they still needed one of those guys fully alive. He was raised as an assassin. He knew perfectly well how to fight hand-to-hand without a blade. Naruto was going to use the skills he'd learned in childhood to confront the puppet man, to fight without his prize katana, which he still had to pay for. Naruto would face Asori. Yuno would face Madara. Klaus and Mimosa would take care of the wounded and protect each other in case they became targets of either of the two villains. The plan was already on the table in the minds of the knights. Everything was ready for the confrontation. Slowly, Naruto reached for the lion-shaped brooch holding the cloak over his shoulders. He gently removed it and folded it with extreme care, as if it were the most fragile porcelain, as if a single touch could shatter it. With that gentleness, the captain handed the cloak to Mimosa, revealing the dark garment he wore underneath. He truly looked like a ninja. Naruto wouldn't have discarded his cloak if he hadn't seen his rivals discarding theirs. They seemed to want to fight with their ideals, with their own ideas and strength, not using the strength of the organization to which they belonged. And he respected both men's decision, so he did the same. Fighting like a gentleman wouldn't get him to victory against those two. He had to use what he once called ninjutsu, the martial art of the ninja. Watching what the captain was doing, Yuno repeated Naruto's procedure and removed the Golden Dawn cloak from his shoulders, revealing the clothes he had worn since living in Hage with his father, sister, and the rest of the orphans. The boy didn't know exactly why Naruto had discarded the cloak, but he decided to follow in his footsteps. Oddly enough, he felt a connection with him, or rather with the wind magic he used, as if they were somehow sisters or came from the same place. These gestures did not go unnoticed by the Akatsuki. Ah! A cruel laugh escaped Madara's throat. Are you seriously going to imitate us? You don't even seem to have any originality. Oh, is that so? Naruto's voice sounded calm. Yuno thought of the Wizard King when she heard it, as if he belonged to the most powerful man in the Clover Kingdom. I'm sorry. Next time I won't copy your half-naked style of dressing, Mr. Three-Mouth. You bastard. Katsu. Provocation. One of the combatants in a fight will always try to provoke the other. Naruto used this principle to provoke Madara. He had studied the mercenary during the early stages. He understood that his arrogance stemmed from his power from having been recruited by Akatsuki at a younger age than the others. And it was precisely this that he could use against him, which he would make Yuno use to defeat him before dealing with the puppeteer. Wind magic. Tornado Tower. Yuno unfurled the four-leaf grimoire and summoned a tornado between them and the Akatsuki, always targeting the clay animals that were running toward them. They were engulfed by the thunder and launched into the skies, just as Madara's command caused them to explode, creating small fireworks of orange smoke and fire. Madara Sasori grasped the Crimson Lion's captain's intentions. He tried to get Madara to stop his mind from filling with rage, to fall for his provocations. He had succeeded once, but he had to prevent him from doing it a second time. Don't you see what he's doing? He's taunting you into making moves, into expending chakra. Chakra? Naruto's alerts went off after hearing that word he hadn't heard in almost 10 years, since he left his old home and was found half dead by the Wizard King. I know. You don't have to keep reminding me. The Akatsuki reached into his bag. From it, he pulled out a lump of clay. I'm going to make them explode. Art is an explosion. Yuno-kun, Naruto flexed his fingers as he watched the Akatsuki. Since you're going to be in charge of the claymore, I want you to be mindful of everything you see. Even a flower can be an explosive that will engulf you, do you understand? At first, Naruto considered Yuno to be an arrogant boy, too wrapped up in his friendless role and completely despicable. Those were the initial vibes the boy gave him, based on the way he spoke to the others. But seeing him smile imperceptibly when he saw Asta changed his mind. And? One more thing. Knock the guy out. He's an explosion fighter. He might end up doing a self-explosion or something. Both Akatsuki were shinobi. For several minutes, Naruto had doubted this was possible. But only ninjas summoned chakra from mana and fought without a grimoire, using the energy directly through their bodies like a living wand. And with that confirmed, Naruto preferred to avoid any suicide on the part of one of the two mercenaries. They needed information to know what they were looking for in the Clover Kingdom and who was leading them. Okay. Wasn't expressive. Unlike his friend and rival, Estarossa showed far more expressions throughout the day than did in an entire month. This brought back memories for Naruto. Have you stopped talking, idiots? A huge bird appeared in front of both knights. Explosive clay. Phoenix. Can you fly, Yes, although I don't have the extensive experience to keep up with him. Hated to admit that he was out of practice at something and needed to improve, but they weren't in a situation where he had to put his pride before himself, he had to do the opposite. Put his pride aside in order to win, although he would never tell Estarossa that. Now. Light and gentle, wind magic had to be treated with delicacy and love, understanding that while it could caress you, it could cut you into two completely unequal parts. That's enough for someone like you, kun. By the end of the day, you'll have a better handle on that magic, you'll see. Giving a shove, Naruto directly grabbed the puppet that attacked him from behind and threw it at Madara. The Akatsuki took off on their clay bird, leaving Sasori's tool to be shattered into pieces. Idiot. Complicated and strange, such was the relationship between the two men who loved art in ways as different as their own characters, which caused both artists to argue on more than one occasion about which of the two arts was better. The eternal or the explosive. I don't know where you're looking. Sasori shook his head in surprise. But you should be looking at me. The puppeteer tried to evade the blow, but he didn't react in time. He felt Naruto's fist slam directly into his stomach, the wind sliced through his wooden skin, and, shortly after, he was engulfed by a mini tornado until he crashed to the ground. Oh. I don't just fight with my sword, idiot. Hijutsu, ninjutsu, and kenjutsu. The three main martial arts of the ninja were instilled in him from the moment he could walk at the age of 4. Naruto always preferred swords, was drawn to them, and his best friend wanted to be the best swordswoman in the world. But his instructors were clear. As a ninja, his body had to be a weapon he could use in any circumstance, anywhere, and at any time. Sasori was probably raised the same way, though he doubted it. The fifth always saw children as potential members of his army, as tools with which to win a war. Why, you've surprised me. Sasori began to sit up with difficulty. The right side of his torso was fractured. I've faced some knights and renegade magicians. But you of all people, are very strange. As a kid, I was the guy who surprised everyone, Sasori longed. Sasori sensed the hidden feelings in Naruto's tone of voice. So it's not something I find strange, I understand what it's like to be surprised by how cool I am. You're just as much of an idiot as my partner. Maybe. Shards of earth flew around the Uzumaki. A curtain of dust, dirt, and rocks covered his vision like a perfect cloud. From it emerged a few puppets as a distraction, all connected to a single string. Sasori used the puppets as a second curtain behind the first. He sent chakra into his legs and proceeded to jump through the rubble while simultaneously unfurling the blades on his arms. He had a clear opportunity, a moment to seize. Using the dust and debris attached to the puppets, he would confuse his opponent and impale him in the chest, something he had done before. It was a good plan for someone who trusted their eyesight. Hearing allowed Naruto to know where the puppets were. Touch allowed him to sense changes in the air, where they moved. Smell allowed him to distinguish the types of poison and their intensity. Using 3 of his senses, the captain knew exactly where Sasori's tools of the red sand were, and by knowing their distribution, he could avoid them when necessary. Although I must add my sensor. Sasori hadn't taken into account a key element in the confrontation. His opponent's sensor ability. Naruto used his senses as his main weapon, which he sharpened through the kai that came from all things. But he added that he could see mana, the thin line that connected the puppets to Sasori's hand, something that escaped the Akatsuki member's plan and jeopardized any move he made. And he also perceived what a person emitted. Iron sand. Drizzle. Each of the puppets Sasori used had previously been a famous shinobi who had fought in some important confrontation or had fought directly against him and was interested in their power. Naruto had forced him to use one of his best puppets. Ninja techniques. Naruto swung both legs and jumped back, letting the sand fall where it had been before. That movement hadn't been summoned by a grimoire hand signals, which indicated to the captain that the movement had come directly from the puppet behind Sasori. Jutsus. Although I am young, I have traveled. The wind compressed inside Naruto's hand, forming a completely white almost invisible blade. When the puppets were inches away, he swung the blade, generating a sheer wave that tore them apart like his sisters. You're certainly amazing. Sasori appeared behind Naruto. His metal blades were fully extended, like elongated razor-sharp claws. If it were daytime, they would probably blind anyone who looked directly at them. Thank you. Reacting to the change, Naruto spun around and struck his wind-formed sword against Sasori's blades, creating light sparks and a metallic sound much like huge nails scraping metal. You have good reflexes for a simple magician. Who are you really, kid? I'll answer you if you tell me what you're looking for. They both leaped away from each other. Naruto had to admit, at least internally, that fighting with a sword made of wind was too difficult for him. To maintain the blade's shape, he had to constantly concentrate and compress all the air that formed the blade, something that slowly wore him down physically, not just with his mana. An exchange of information. Sasori dodged a thrust by moving his body at the last second. The rogue noticed that Naruto was moving better as he used the wind-shaped sword more. That would be something to be thankful for. Naruto shifted his head to the right, letting the leaves lightly pass over his head. With a little momentum, he skidded backward. Leader Sama wouldn't be proud if I told what I know. That confrontation should have been over. That was the feeling that ran through Sasori's body every time he clashed with his opponent. It was as if the captain was toying with him, as if he were hiding something else inside or simply sizing him up. If it was the latter, he had no more puppets to use against him. A pity, puppeteer. Passing under Sasori's outstretched arm, Naruto pierced through Sasori's stomach with his mana sword. Pieces of wood flew out, but there was no blood or muscle tearing to indicate he'd hit an organ. Oh. I'm a puppet, idiot. Sasori took advantage of Naruto's immobile position. He lowered his arm and extended all the blades. They soon cut through the fabric, skin, and muscle of the captain's back, forcing him to spit some blood onto the ground in front of him. Confided me. My entire body is imbued with poison. A potent and deadly poison now courses through your bloodstream that will kill you in minutes. It's been interesting, but art is beautiful when it's eternal. Naruto stumbled. The mana sword vanished from his hand, and a loud cough made him hunch forward, vomiting blood. Sasori turned his back on his enemy, focusing his attention on Mimosa and Klaus. I'm going to end this. It's not personal. Hey. A hand fell on Sasori's right shoulder, forcing him to stop and turn his face. You don't think poison's going to stop me? Don't ignore me. The lessons etched in childhood are never forgotten, no matter how hard one tries. Naruto knew that well. Everything he learned in his village could never leave his mind, his body, his constant memories. Not just the blood that stained his hands, but everything he knew about death and murder, the things that had made him a soldier since childhood, a true murderer. Firmly gripping Sasori's shoulder, Naruto stabbed his wind mana sword straight into the man's back. The tip popped out at the other end, surprising the Akatsuki member. You should be dying. You see, no, puppeteer. Naruto flexed his legs, showing blood-stained teeth as he twisted his lips into a sinister smile. Now, disappear. A downward slash that shattered Sasori's entire torso, separating his upper body from his lower body. It was a clean cut, one that wouldn't have created any imperfections on a body made of flesh. You. Creating a weak point quickly, the knight's hand caught the cylinder with the only organ that still remained in that puppet body, a body that should have been completely inorganic is just too stupid, you know. Severed from his body by the subsequent destruction of his torso, Sasori's head rolled until it hit a rock, his eyes staring directly at Naruto. The substitute captain of the Crimson Lions held the cylinder with the kanji heart in his right hand. I never expected to die, but at least I do it as a perfect representation of art. Did you always know about my weakness? I've been studying you. Just one point on your entire body was constantly glowing, and I connected the dots in seconds. The Uzumaki's face lowered slightly, as if he were looking at the cylinder. I am your natural enemy, Sasori of the Red Sand. The hand closed around the cylinder. Reinforced by mana, it crushed the Akatsuki's heart, leading to its immediate death, without a trial. Akatsuki was after something important, that was what Naruto's senses were screaming at him, even those he didn't have. But what were they looking for in the Forgotten Region, and why? He had been the only ninja to set foot on the shores of that continent, and now there were two members of an organization that belonged a continent away. As if the eye of the midnight sun wasn't enough, now we have to deal with these guys. Julius is going to get very interested in this and ask a lot of questions. Despite knowing Julius for almost 10 years, he hadn't told him everything about his home, about the place he escaped from with his hands completely stained with blood. Maybe it's a punishment for my sins. He turned his hand, allowing the remains of the heart to fall onto the billowing Akatsuki robes, which were represented by red clouds on a completely black background. Black as despair. That O of despair came to mind. For some reason, he felt the urge to cut the beastman in two, but at the same time, that same urge faded after a few seconds. Arg. This is too complicated for an idiot like me. It's better if Julius handles these things. I'm just a pawn, and I'm worth as much as a mere pawn, right? Chapter 9. Over the centuries, spirit magic had selected its wielders from among the mages most closely connected to their element, representing the primal elements of nature. The spirit of wind, the spirit of fire, the spirit of water, and the spirit of earth. Each of these imbued its wielder with greater power, giving them control over spirit magic and a greater connection to their element. During the dungeon quest on the border with the Diamond Kingdom, Yuno had made a connection with a small fairy, who granted him the strength to defeat the enemy mage and escape alive. Later, during the invasion of the royal capital, he was forced to use the spirit power he had acquired to confront his adversary and achieve victory, although it was ultimately a woman of the Black Bulls who delivered the final blow. Uncontrollable. Spirit magic took time to master. They were worthy, but the spirits were so proud they wouldn't bow down to a mere human, as if they were a tool they could use. They gave them their powers, but if they truly wanted to harness the full power they possessed, the chosen ones had to earn the spirit's appreciation and work with them with unwavering determination. Since the incident with the Eye of the Midnight Sun, Yuno had been trying to get his spirit to grant him its power again, to make it his own and elevate his strength. But that spirit had refused to bow to the young mage, showing the boy that this power would be a challenge to control, so he had to somehow connect with the Wind Fairy. To be the Wizard King, a Wizard Knight had to achieve results. That was what Julius told the two young men from Hage when they asked how to obtain the position. And the Wizard King meant it. The nobles wouldn't support someone without excellent results, and the people wouldn't acclaim him unless he had proven his power and could protect them. Yuno wanted to take the power of the spirit to become much stronger, to stand out among the rookies of the different orders and climb to the position of captain of the Golden Dawn, something that was still very far from his current level, but that was a step that he had to overcome if he wanted to be a Wizard King and finally defeat Asta in the dream that they both shared. The commoner had many barriers to becoming a Wizard King. From joining an order to becoming a captain, any knight who didn't belong to the nobility would be questioned at every step, singled out and judged by the nobility and the various royal families, constantly being whispered about as if he were merely an intruder, as if he shouldn't be where he was. Results. To make people, the nobility, forget where a knight serving the kingdom came from, he had to show the results of his work under the command of his captain and the wise man, his merits during the various confrontations with neighboring kingdoms, and the missions assigned to said squadron, which varied from missions in which the individual had to work as part of a team to those in which he had to work alone, without any support. Yuno was determined to achieve results, to show that he was willing to attain the position of Wizard King to completely change the kingdom, to undo the prejudices and discrimination that plagued those in the Forgotten Region. It was a laudable dream from someone pure of heart. But others would view it with mockery. No one could change the nobility. Arrogant and egotistical, they had believed themselves to be the center of the world since times before the present era, something that eventually took root until it created the weak and arrogant nobility that lived today. It was going to be a difficult road that Yuno couldn't wait to take. His time at Hage Church with his sister, father, and orphans was his personal motivation. Both his own and Asta's, whom he saw as a rival to beat, but at the same time, he loved like his own brother, something he wouldn't say openly. If he wanted to overcome all the walls that stood in front of him and give a better life to his family and to all those who were discriminated against, he had to be able to use the power of the spirit that resided in his four-leaf grimoire, something that currently seemed far from his hand. Focus, you arrogant boy. HN. Mages were accustomed to aerial battles when using their brooms, but using one in a confrontation with Madara was a mistake. Using his clay, the Akatsuki member could travel on enormous explosive birds that exceeded the speed of a broom, an object into which the Magus had to constantly send mana while fighting in the sky, evading the spells of others. Yuno had opted to use his mana to fly through the sky, something he'd been doing in recent battles. But he still had to get used to moving at high speeds, something he wasn't supposed to do when using a broom. But he understood that the confrontation with that man would help him improve even further and help him continue to overcome his own personal barriers. I'm going to make your pretty boy face explode. Impossible, the wind ruffled both fighters' hair. Madara was perched on the back of his phoenix, right between the two enormous clay wings. A few meters ahead of him was Yuno, flying without a broom, using wind mana to do so. I'll blow up your own clay before it even touches me. HN. You're just like those shitty Uchiha. Madara stretched his arm back and swung it forward, launching a white mass directly towards the Golden Dawn member. Explosive clay. C1. That chakra-infused clay expanded, revealing hundreds of small spheres, small round explosives with red dots that flew directly toward their target. Yuno moved her arm over her grimoire, flipping through the pages. Wind magic, the greenish light illuminated his face for several seconds. Tornado Tower. The explosive spheres were swallowed by the immense tornado that emerged between Yuno and Madara. Launched into the sky like the spider before, the spheres exploded, causing smoke and embers to rain down. TCH. Dadara bit his lower lip slightly. I'm going to do something with that book. HN. The grimoire was the tool everyone used in their battles. It was the weapon that augmented a mage's abilities, that increased the power of their spells. When a mage died, their grimoire was completely forgotten, buried among dust and other forgotten grimoires. Dadara's objective was clear. To destroy Yuno's grimoire to prevent him from using his spells and mana during combat. It was a good plan, but the youngest member of Akatsuki was unfamiliar with combat against magic knights and their constant spells, something that could take its toll if Yuno grew accustomed to the fighting style of a shinobi from across the sea. Explosive clay. C1. Yuno watched her enemy's repetitive movement. She had managed to get rid of him with the weakest move her grimoire had, but the guy seemed stubborn and insistent, so she summoned the tornado tower again as a shield. Like the previous time, the spheres were launched into the sky, flooding it with smoke and embers just like the first time. Impossible. That simple move isn't going to beat my tornado tower, no matter how hard you try. I'm watching all your moves. HN. It's obvious you haven't fought many of my kind, brat. The wind stirred, and Yuno moved to the right, dodging small birds made of clay. Behind the Golden Dawn Knight, a second Dadara was present, riding an immense clay dragon. Explosive clay. C2 dragon. Dadara flew around Yuno in a perfect circle, preventing the young knight from moving freely. Clone magic. Does he use spells too? What kind of magic is it? Yuno began to think, to analyze her opponent. Since his appearance, Dadara had only used the clay he seemed to have in the pouches hanging from the belt at his waist. He hadn't given any indication that he used a grimoire or that he possessed any kind of extra magic due to any secondary grimoire in his possession. Like the red-haired man, the blonde man didn't look like an ordinary mage. Both used strange techniques, ones no one had ever used before in history. It was likely that someone could use puppets, like raids using the dead, or explosions, like Magna using her explosive fireballs. But despite the presence of earth-loving mages who molded the earth into armies of sand and clay, a clay mage had never appeared. Yuno understood that to defeat that man, she must first decipher how he used his magic, what he was capable of, and how he used it in battle. She couldn't rely solely on her own power. She had to choose to follow her instincts in battle, the ones that had brought her victory on other occasions. He unfolded the grimoire in front of him. He felt the wind swirl around him, his hair whipping around him fiercely and menacingly in front of his amber eyes. Wind magic. Crescent moon Kamitachi. Yuno extended his arm forward. He waited several seconds, focusing his gaze on both Dadara's, and fired the spell after uttering the last syllable, just as one of the two blondes passed in front of him, forcing him to move to avoid the crescent-shaped slash that would have split his clay transport. Good instincts. Dadara on the enormous dragon pointed at Yuno with his left hand. But you're not going to beat us with that poor move. Clay birds on the front and small insects on the back, made of the same material. Yuno extended both arms and cast two tornado towers, placing one in each lake. Each spell launched the clay animals into the air, thus preventing them from hitting their summoner. Ahaha. Laughter emerged from Dadara flying on the phoenix. How long can you hold out? The curse escaped the Golden Dawn member's lips. His nearly golden eyes darted from one blonde to the other, trying to capture their movements. He couldn't pinpoint them because he knew they weren't traveling at their fastest speed. But if he got the timing right, he could summon a tornado tower to appear directly from within one or both of the flying beasts. This might cause the explosion to engulf both the clone and the original, but would allow him to move toward his enemy, with the clone completely eliminated. He had to wait for the exact moment, the instant when both blondes passed the ideal spot to cast the spell inside their mounts. Yuno had been using the spell to calibrate it, to check how intensely she needed to cast it for the explosives to detonate. I can hold out all night. A bow formed by wind appeared in front of the magic knight. Wind magic. White bow of the gale. 6 arrows made of wind shot directly toward Dadara, who was riding the white phoenix. He stopped, ordering his mount to hover over a space. That's not going to stop me. Swinging his arm, Dadara threw a huge number of clay dolls. They exploded upon direct contact with the arrows, piercing through and creating small clouds of smoke. What? Dadara had been overconfident. He had expected the arrows to be destroyed along with his C1 explosives, that his enemy would make a more defensive than offensive move. But instead of using it entirely on defense, Yuno strengthened the spell so that it completely penetrated the clay insects so that the arrows would hit his opponent and injure him beyond further combat. The 6 arrows approached in a single array. Following Yuno's movement, the enormous arrow pierced Dadara's chest, leaving a gaping hole that allowed the other side to be seen. Yuno's arm fell to his side. According to the information he'd received, that was the real Dadara. The blonde's lips twisted into a bloody, arrogant grin. I'm the clone, idiot. Explosive clay. C1 massive. Yuno heard Madara's voice right above him, at least 20 meters above his head. He raised his head and opened his eyes wide. Hundreds of small clay animals were falling on him like a rain of explosive clay. And he didn't have time to escape from all those animals. You pierced me. The clone appeared behind Yuno. He slipped his arms under the boy's, holding him in a headlock. And now I'm taking you to hell with me. Yuno thrashed about, trying to get rid of the clone. But when he began to summon fire, he was completely engulfed by the clay, the fire and smoke resulting from the continuous explosions engulfing him until he was engulfed in smoke and flames, sending him straight to the ground. That had been the explosive artist's plan from the start. To confuse his opponent by enclosing him in a complete circle while being watched over entirely by two of his clones riding two immense clay animals. And while this was happening, he would accumulate clay and chakra to unleash a barrage of explosions that would ultimately kill him or at least leave him severely injured to the point of being unable to move. Ha! This is art. Above the immense dragon formed of clay, Madara shouted to the sky. Have you seen Sasori? This is art. Blind creation magic. Ah! Brain of wind blades. He survived. Wind-shaped blades formed and moved directly toward Madara and a barrage of helpless swords controlled by their summoner. The Akatsuki member could only receive it, being engulfed by the clay dragon's explosion as it was pierced by the blades. Madara reached out and landed on a massive owl formed from his clay. Crouching, the Akatsuki looked toward Yuno, widening his eyes as he saw the falcon made of wind behind the mage. That bastard. How much chakra does he have? Mages and ninjas lived on different continents, with completely different opposing worldviews. Ninjas used energy as chakra, while mages believed that energy was the mana they possessed within them, which they could manipulate extensively after obtaining a grimoire. Due to distance and cultural differences, both believed that the other used the same energy as they did. Impossible. Art is not an explosion. Madara's right eyebrow twitched and he pointed an accusing finger directly at Yuno. What would an idiot know about art? The beautiful art of explosion is what endures throughout history. Impossible. That's something completely forgotten. The wind stirred, ruffling the Akatsuki's long hair. I'm going to finish you off once and for all. Madara shoved his hands into the bags he was carrying. That's something I'd like to see, you little shit. Yuno had understood how her opponent's attacks worked. He used the clay that was completely malleable by Madara's hands. Hands that had strange mouths with which he formed the clay figures he used to attack. If his enemy lost the clay, his attacks would be cut off. Wind magic. Tornado Fang. The direct attack. Don't make me laugh. Two enormous phoenixes appeared on either side of Madara. This art is going to sink you. Yuno pushed a horizontal tornado toward Madara. The explosion artist snapped his fingers and both phoenixes moved forward. The first was engulfed by the tornado, ending its existence with a powerful explosion that completely destroyed the tornado. The second passed beneath the explosion and, covered by smoke, arrived in front of the Golden Dawn member. It's faster. The boy covered himself with a cloak of wind and used both arms to shield his face. The phoenix-shaped clay exploded in front of the teenager, completely enveloping him in a cloud of scorching fire that lightly burned his clothes. Fight, fight, fight. You idiot magic knights can't think of killing freely. Madara swung his arm horizontally, generating a cloud of small phoenixes. That useless thought allows me to kill you with my art. Since the founding of the orders of magical knights, they hadn't killed an enemy unless necessary. They used their power to subdue and control their adversaries in pursuit of peace in the kingdom, all under the supervision of the Wizard King himself. However, the knights were not immune to death. They worked to protect the Clover Kingdom, so they had to do whatever it took to maintain peace, and if someone was potentially dangerous, they had to be eliminated. Unlike them, the shinobi were immersed in death, bathed in blood on every battlefield. After 3 wars pitting great nations against each other, it was clear that they were there for elimination, not salvation. Killing their adversary was a priority. Following the rules was a priority. They had to comply with whatever the village leader dictated, whatever the feudal lord demanded. As tools, the protection of their villages came before all else. Impossible. A strong wind blew away the smoke covering Yuno's body, revealing faint burns on her skin and clothes. The brightness of her eyes matched the intense color that had emerged from the 4-leaf grimoire. I'm not going to die here. You're not going to kill me here. The same number of small wind spears were generated in front of Yuno. I'm going to survive. You're not going to do it. Madara showed a dark, sinister face. His smile was filled with mockery and arrogance. Enough of these games. I'm going to end your existence by charring your body with an explosion. One that will etch your death into all those companions scattered across the meadow, poisoned. Yuno wasn't worried about his comrades or the members of the Crimson Lions. Strangely, he trusted the substitute captain and knew he would protect Klaus, Mimosa, and everyone else injured by the two members of the mercenary group. That was why his mind was focused solely on the confrontation, on the enemy in front of him, ready to kill him. Impossible. Your companion will have already been defeated. The captain of the Crimson Lion seems competent. A young rookie of the Golden Dawn wasn't a man of many words or one who showed admiration for anyone. Quiet, he only spoke when necessary and showed respect for those he saw performing well before his eyes. Therefore, the fact that he trusted Naruto after meeting him twice would be strange to anyone who knew him. Sasori. Sasori will be done for by that sloppy blonde, just like I'll be done for by you. Explosive clay. C1 condensed cloud. Wind magic. White bow of the gale. The flying clay animals flew directly toward their target. Wind arrows shot out toward the various medium-sized animals, causing explosions throughout the night sky. I need a devastating attack. With a single blow, I can. Yuno's thoughts were cut short. The boy shook his head slightly, opening his amber eyes. Sitting on his right shoulder was Sylph, the small green fairy who represented the wind itself. Do you need some help, Yuno? Since the attack on the royal capital, Sylph had remained completely absent, ignoring the young knight's attempts to summon her power. She was the spirit of the wind, one of the four spirits of the world, and not a tool to be used. She had chosen Yuno as her wielder, but she wanted to see if the boy could truly defend himself. No. Oh. What do you mean? The spirit's small hands grabbed the summoner's cheek. Be honest with yourself, Yuno. Yahahaha. What is that little thing, brat? A bucking butterfly? Yahahaha. The shinobi were accustomed to summons on their continent. High-ranking ninjas used them during their clashes, during the bloody wars. But they had always been enormous beasts, with devastating power that left more than one jaw agape. It was true that some summons were small, but the size of a simple butterfly. Sylph's cheeks puffed out slightly, annoyed. Let's go and finish him off, Yuno. You say something sensible. The green glow reflected in Yuno's eyes. Wind spirit magic. Sylph breath. Let's see who wins. Madara raised his arms. Explosive clay. C3. The giant humanoid form cast a huge shadow over Yuno. The knight and the spirit stared at the enormous being made of air, and the boy tried to understand the damage it could cause. Using Sylph breath, Yuno planned to envelop the blast and send it far away, while simultaneously knocking down Madara once and for all. The clay humanoid collided with the air current bullet generated by Yuno, with the help of Sylph. Surprising Madara, his C3 was completely shattered. Parts of the enormous humanoid were suspended in the sky, exploding in small harmless explosions, completely disabling his enemy's attack. The Akatsuki member couldn't say anything else, unable to evade his opponent's movement. Madara was engulfed by the bullet of currents and burned by his clay owl, which exploded as soon as the spell engulfed it, enveloping its own creator in a sea of flames fanned by the wind of the spell. Yuno abruptly swung her arm down. The Sylph's breath crashed into the ground, generating a gale that shook the trees, causing them to creak in the fierce hurricane-force wind. When the wind completely subsided, Yuno saw her enemy, his eyes blank, completely unconscious. He hadn't suffered serious damage that would have led to death, but they would have to heal him as soon as possible if they wanted to extract information from him. That had been a victory. Chapter 10. The number of times an enemy was interrogated could be counted on one hand in the Clover Kingdom. The frequency with which enemies fell into the hands of the Magic Knights was quite high, but much lower compared to the ninjas across the sea. Clashes between the different kingdoms led soldiers to follow one of two paths much more frequently. Either they were killed in the middle of battle, or they were imprisoned in the enemy kingdom's prison for a completely indefinite period of time in order to obtain information so that the prisoner could not refuse to give information. Ninjas used what was known as genjutsu. Illusory techniques capable of extracting cold confessions from the people they were used on. Although ninjas' resistance to such techniques was usually high if they had undergone consistent and well-executed training from their instructors during their adolescence and up to their promotion to high-class ninja. This was very different within the Clover Kingdom. The Magic Knights didn't have a consistent user of illusionary techniques to conduct interrogations. The person in charge of obtaining information on the nation's dangerous prisoners or terrorists was the Wizard King's right-hand man. Marx Francois, one of the Wizard King's advisors and an advanced user of memory magic, which allowed humans to manipulate memories and obtain necessary information from people under their care. This time, however, someone else had been tasked with gathering information about the prisoner. Marx, as Julius's advisor, had been forced to leave the castle to conduct some important business for the Magic Knights. Marx was the advisor who rarely left his post and the castle. He had to keep an eye on Julius, who seemed interested in learning about all the strange magic in the world and left his post far more regularly than Marx himself would like, and he had to end up seeking out the wise man when this happened. However, the wise man was currently meeting with a person extremely upset about what had happened a few days ago, and Julius could not allow the upset in said person to extend for too long because he knew the temperament of said woman and it would not be appropriate to keep her in that state if they wanted to keep the city intact. Said woman was none other than Mereoleona Vermilion, the older sister of Hugolion, the captain of the Crimson Lion, and a woman of strong character when the situation called for it. When it came to appointing a new captain, pending Mereoleona's approval, Julius had placed one of his loyal knights over the current captain's sister, something that didn't seem to bother the woman. However, the fact that the Order of the Crimson Lion had suffered several deaths and injuries following the appearance of a strange group had been enough to make Mereoleona show a bit of her explosive temper, something the Wizard King was willing to deal with while the current captain obtained information from the prisoner. Therefore, both Julius and Mereoleona were in the former's office. The Wizard King had accepted the woman's request to meet in his office, knowing what she wanted. With the defeat of the Crimson Lion, the Vermilion family's pride had been wounded with a heavy wound that would hang over the heads of the survivors and, knowing this, Julius had chosen to meet with Hugolion's sister before she decided to take any action driven by anger. And within the list the man considered was a direct confrontation against a man currently leading the order for his negligence, as several nobles had highlighted. The social difference, combined with the status of foreigner within the Clover Kingdom, made anyone a clear target for nobles or those with deeply rooted ideas. People like Yami and Naruto had faced such a stigma, and Julius had to acknowledge the strength of both men throughout their lives in the Clover Kingdom, being judged by strangers and treated as outcasts without obtaining a shred of calm or peace from it. During all the minutes they were in the room, Mereoleona's eyes never left Julius's. Like a wild animal, the woman remained alert at all times, her muscles tensed, rigid against any possible enemy attack. The royal city hadn't had the best defensive ratings for some time, and the appearance of the Eye of the Midnight Sun and her brother's fatal wound put Mereoleona on edge. Due to what had happened and the resignation of the current captain, the Wizard King had been considering the possibility of inviting that woman to take the position of captain within the Crimson Lion, and Julius could not see anyone better than Mereoleona occupying that position at present, at least until Hugolion's recovery, who would have too long a time to recover, according to what was commented by the healing mages in charge of his care. And Mereoleona's power was something Julius took into account in the situation they were in. Of the current captains, few could make a difference against the third eye of the Midnight Sun, and fewer could stand up to the terrorist group's leader. Among those who could stand up to the Eye of the Midnight Sun's top leaders were the captain of the Golden Dawn, William Vengeance, the captain of the Black Bulls, Yami Sukahiro, Mereoleona Vermilion, Nozzle Silva, and Naruto Uzumaki. If he were awake, Julius was certain that Hugolion could be a worthy opponent for the members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. Although the wise man didn't look down on the other captains. Each of them had their own qualities and strengths. But the ones he had in mind were the ones who could make a huge difference and openly confront the strongest members of the terrorist group. It was in them that Julius had placed the most trust, the ones he believed would make a difference in the coming war. The wise man was no idiot. He could have sent the Black Bulls to search for the magic stones the terrorist group was seeking, but war was at the gates of the Clover Kingdom, and he was aware of it. The Eye of Midnight Sun had stirred many people discontented with the current hierarchy and the mistreatment of those above them. Things have gotten quite hectic, wise man. Julius heard the mockery in the woman's words. Mereoleona's eyes betrayed no such mockery. Her feelings were more akin to a wildfire, the wild dance of a bonfire burning in the middle of a forest. The mockery in the woman's voice was a false impression that reached the Wizard King's ears. Ah. But only a little, Mereoleona-san. The man's lips curved into a calm smile as the woman looked at him. The confrontation with the unknown group of mercenaries had been a severe blow to the Magic Knights, and Julius knew that with only too certainty. Ever since your brother's injury, things haven't been going too well. Although the Black Bulls are currently dealing with something important. The magic stones the Eye of Midnight Sun were seeking were the very ones Julius wanted to obtain to stop any plan Licht might be plotting that could push the Clover Kingdom to the brink of near destruction or civil war. The terrorist group wasn't just using hatred toward knights as a recruiting tool. The fear, the gap between nobles and commoners, was growing before their eyes, and no one would be able to stop it if it reached a certain point. Julius was aware of this, of the danger Licht represented and everything he represented to those outside the kingdom's elite. And if Licht played his cards right, he could likely spark a civil war that would devastate the kingdom more than anyone could imagine. Yami of the Black Bulls is in charge, right? And you've put a rookie in charge of my brother's order. He's the one who created all this current chaos. The Wizard King knew where the woman in front of him was going with the words. She had planned to blame Naruto for everything that had happened, something that wasn't entirely true. Was Mereoleona upset that he hadn't thought of her to take command of the Crimson Lion? There could be jealousy behind that resentment in her voice. Naruto is actually a very competent magic knight when you give him the leeway to work. Being a captain isn't exactly his cup of tea, though. For Julius, Naruto might have been an excellent commander in a critical moment, but he was even better as a frontline fighter facing enemies. As a child and pre-adolescent, Julius observed that the Uzumaki was extremely unpredictable, which, coupled with his strange nature, could generate uncertainty and anger in his adversaries, as it did against the third eye of the Midnight Sun and other enemies of the kingdom. Considering both aspects, the boy's compatibility as a captain was high if motivated with the right incentives. However, motivation in this case seemed to have been minimal since he was offered the position. Now he would have to cede it to Figolian's sister and keep what had happened behind a smokescreen that no one should open and reveal. If news of the defeat of a knightly order spread throughout the rest of the kingdoms, they would likely be targeted in an upcoming war between the countries surrounding them. I'll believe that when I see with my own eyes that bastard who brought the Crimson Lion to this low point in his own history. The fire in Mereoleona's eyes had not diminished in intensity since they began that conversation, and her fierce, lion-like attitude had not wavered, despite the fact that the calm eyes of the wise man had not left her the entire time, analyzing any reaction that might come from the woman. Julius knew about the incident between the Vermilion brothers. That confrontation between the siblings left unprecedented destruction and marked the true character of Mereoleona Vermilion, the strongest woman within the Magic Knights currently. You might know him before your time, the wise man murmured, rising from the seat he'd been occupying until then, all to look out over the city. Information about the criminal group and the terrorist is necessary to continue working. You can't go chasing someone if you don't know who they are, can you? And soon we'll have information about who they are and what they're looking for. As if summoned by Julius, a sharp knock was heard from the door before it opened, revealing the former vice captain of the Aquamarine Deer standing in the doorway, his orderly cloak not covering his shoulders, revealing his torso covered by a black shirt that clung to his chest. What the Magic King noticed with his gaze was the subtle movement the vice captain made when he adjusted the blindfold over his eyes, as if he had previously removed it. Had he used his eyes to interrogate the mercenary? Julius, as well as the rest of the Magic Knights, always saw the Uzumaki with the blindfold hiding his face, and it prevented them from seeing his eyes without it at all times. Could there be a possibility that the boy wasn't actually blind? The Magic King doubted Naruto was lying to him in that regard. He even had trouble fighting with his sword on many occasions or locating certain things. I smell some earth. Tapping his nose with his finger, he moved his head to where Mereoleona was standing. It wasn't unusual for Naruto to pick up certain scents with his enhanced nose. Though he didn't enhance it using magic. And a little bit of sulfur sweat too, The woman's lips curved. You're very bold, boy. Really? Thanks. Julius smiled somewhat nervously, seeing how Naruto couldn't grasp the danger in certain situations. He was sometimes naive and childish even in the worst situations a person could imagine, which could include a war against an enemy army. But despite that, Julius could count on him to overcome any situation. What have you discovered, Naruto? Naruto's expression changed completely. The previously calm atmosphere around him turned as cold as the steel of his sword. The guy's name is Madara. He belongs to an organization known as the Akatsuki or something like that. They seem to have a total of 10 members, more or less. Without the puppet guy and our guest in the lower cells, their number has been reduced to about 8, if I've estimated correctly. And what are they looking for? I doubt they'd eliminate a contingent of knights just for pleasure. They're looking for the 9 demonic beasts, which are the 9 keys to hell. That's what our dear guest called it. There were myths that came from unknown corners of the world. The gate of hell was associated with the 9 keys of hell and was a legend told in Naruto's former home. A story that was ingrained in its inhabitants and with a much darker undertone than anyone could imagine. First stones and now beasts, the woman's growl accompanied her words as her teeth snapped in a bite resembling an animal's. What's true about that story? Why would they come all the way to the Clover Kingdom for a story about your country? A sigh came from the swordsman's mouth. They're looking for one of the vessels holding said keys. According to the information he has, he's hiding within the territories of the Clover Kingdom, concealing his presence from our knights and Julius. There were few things the Wizard King didn't know if he was within the borders of the Clover Kingdom. As the supreme leader of the Magic Knights, Julius was aware of the sensitive information he needed to know, the moves he needed to make. Among that information was the foreigners who arrived on the kingdom's shores and knowing what they were planning to do, what their real purpose was behind their presence. That's a bit strange, the Wizard King murmured, looking directly into his pupil's face. I know few people who could truly be considered a vessel, and the legends of foreign countries are a bit beyond my understanding. How could we possibly know who these vessels are? Is there anything different about them? Could our guest have given you that information? There's no need for Madara to give me such information, Wizard King. I know the legend even better than many elders. It's a myth of my people, sir, though I'd say it's better to call such vessels Jinchuriki. Power of human sacrifice. Julius remained silent as the information left his pupil's mouth. He clasped his hands and kept his eyes on the swordsman's figure. That is new. They've disguised the original story with a much less tragic one for those who carry these beasts. I'd even say that, in this story, it doesn't seem like anyone can die if the beast is taken from its bearer, which is the case. The beast and its jailer are linked in life and death, although the former can return to life within a period of 3 years. You seem to know the story inside out, kid. The vice captain's lips twisted into a sharp smile, revealing the annoyance he felt at talking about the subject. Yes, it's a story tied to the country I come from. Therefore, I believe the Akatsuki originates from my homeland. I don't know exactly how many mercenaries might be searching for the Jinchuriki, but we could be in serious trouble if this spreads. It's possible one of the other kingdoms might want to use him as a weapon. The 9 beasts were beings with infinite power translated into chakra, the raw energy used in the Uzumaki's homeland. Being a constant source, the Jinchuriki were not impeded by running out of energy, although to do so, they had to establish a strong bond with the beast sealed within them. To date, Naruto had only learned of 2 Jinchuriki who could be known as the perfect Jinchuriki. Killer Bee and Yujido Nai of the Cloud. The 2 were, according to information, on good terms with the beast sealed within them. Aren't you the one who is Jinchuriki, Brad? Leona's eyes became sharp as 2 daggers. Naruto's face didn't show that the question had affected him, but instead reflected a calmness that translated into the calm smile the blonde always wore. I don't think I have a beast inside me, Leona-sama. If I had a beast, you would probably have sensed it before, given that you resemble a humanoid lioness. The air in the room turned slightly chilly. The Wizard King found this strangely unusual, especially given that Leona Vermilion was a mage, undoubtedly linked to the fire element. However, at that instant, as he watched the 2 of them stare at each other, Julius felt a chill that could have come from hell itself once frozen over. Ah, Brett. The hand fell on the boy's shoulder. Naruto felt the force behind the grip, but he maintained his composure, smiling at the woman's menacing gaze. You're good at pressuring people with insults, huh? Let's see how that helps you on the battlefield. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.